Hey folks, welcome back to the Reloved Guitars workshop. I'm Sam, and I'm going to turn my phone into quiet mode and all that. Put it out here somewhere. Yes, you're back in the Reloved Guitars workshop on a dark Friday night in November, and been a busy couple of weeks for sure. Just to start off where we mean to be going today or this weekend, we have come across a really nice Squier Strat Standard series. It's not often we come across one that's the kind of price that's worth doing the work on it that I like to do, but occasionally we do, and this is one of them, and it's a real beautiful instrument. I love these Standard series. If those of you who are in the know will know that these are cut above all the rest of the Squier Stratocaster style guitars, well, most of them anyway. The Standard series you can spot because it has the word Standard series, is it? Standard series? Yeah, Standard series written there right at the end of the headstock. It always has a big 70s style headstock, but with sealed tuners, so you're starting from a good place there. Another characteristic thing is the bridge down here is a 2-point floating tremolo system, and not the usual sort of cheaper 6-point floating synchronized tremolo. And the blocks here, the individual saddles, are kind of quite nicely milled or machined, quite precise looking things. Very often they come in a HSS, a humbucker single coil setup, which gives them a really productive range of tones for the jobbing musician, and they often come in this really nice moody sort of dark colour, black on black or black on coal grey with a bit of metallic fleck in there as well, so it's a really nice quality finish in polyurethane with metal bits, and you have a kind of I think it's a 3-spring system in the back here. I think it's only 3, but with access to quite a characteristic telltale teardrop shape or whatever cutaways to get into there. So all in all, a really nice quality guitar, but I have to tell you, this one is a really sorry condition. Not in terms of all its hardware and stuff is great, but if you can look down this neck, you might see this is like that. I liken it to that bridge in that black and white film. You know, we see that swaying bridge in the 50s in America in a storm, which sort of wiggles and sways before it breaks. It reminds me of this. This is one of the most bent necks, over-relieved necks I've ever seen. Consequently, you have an unplayably high action. I mean, I don't know how the guy, very nice, very sweet Cockney chap, sorry if that's an insult to anyone, but a London guy met me at the station in Barking this week to hand over this or to collect this. And, you know, one of those people who goes out of their way to help make the collection easy, and I really like that about eBay. And he'd played this recently, he said, after not having played it for some time, but I cannot understand how the hell he played it, because the action, I'm going to just measure it now, but I predict it's about 5mm at the 12th fret. God knows what else it's like. So that is pretty much, it's 4.5mm at the 12th fret. And actually, funny enough, because it's so bowed, it actually gets, the action gets smaller down here than it is here. So it's probably highest somewhere right in the middle of this, which you could kind of put your hands on your heart and say, no, it's actually 3.5 there, 3.5, 4 there. So yes, it's a mess anyway. So of course it's unplayable. And also the guy, the seller, seems to have put the same string on 3 times. May have broken a B or an E, and he's put 3 G's on by the look of it. So the whole thing is probably under an enormous pressure, which it may have something to do with the amount of bend in the neck. So right here, as we speak, I am going to do the honours, or mercifully, I'm going to put this guitar out of its miseries. Just some adjustments on my stand here. Sorry if it's not such a great camera point. I'm still working out where to put this camera, or have it on some sort of better mount. What I'd really like is Velcro it to the sound unit so I can just carry it around. In fact, during the making of this video, that's what I'm think I'm going to do, I've got a tiny little bit of Velcro spare I had anyway, which I've now lost. Anyhow, I'm going to use that and try and do a little setup so I can just maybe get in closer. But anyway, for now you can see that I'm giving this neck some chance to relax. I think I don't know what the readings are, and I suppose it wouldn't be too hard to do some research and find them, but I think one thing's probably true is that we would all probably be surprised and certainly underestimate the amount of pounds of pressure that a set of 6 steel strings of a certain gauge will put on a guitar neck, and therefore the amount of bend it will create. And I think that if somebody gets it wrong and either over tightens it or puts the wrong gauge strings on and over tightens them, or the wrong gauge in the wrong place and then tightens them up to meet the note they need, I think what you might be really surprised at how much enormous amount of pressure that's put on the neck, and therefore how much it's going to just bend in sympathy or in response. So I think that's probably what's happened to this. I doubt that the previous owner has gone crazy with the truss rod adjustment. I think he's just he's over cranked these strings, he's put the wrong gauges on, and it, I can't say that, but somebody may have made an adjustment in the past that's wrong. Anyway, that side, of course, as soon as I saw that, I thought to myself, well, I can take care of that. We can definitely put that right, and there's nothing else about this that is in any way a problem so far. I haven't even plugged it in. I'm not even going to do that just yet. What I will do for the duration of this guitar is I'm going to just get myself a receptacle for all the bits that are going to come off here, which is something I do every time. And to help me get the strings out through the tremolo block, it helps to just get the back off here, and then I can poke them through. Sometimes they get stuck and they need poking through with a little Allen key. So this guitar is going to get a thorough clean up of all its parts. I'm going to give it a sort of reloving in every sense of the word. Some of the strings are coming out okay, some aren't. Some will need a bit of encouragement. But yeah, so we're going to give it an all-over reloving, which will include cleaning and just making it look like it's a bit more cared for, and checking everything structurally. Now I need to use an Allen key to do a bit of a poke here. And then beyond that, we then give it its full neck treatment, which, as I say time and time again on these videos, is the heart of a decent setup. And if you've watched any of these before, or whether you have or haven't, but that neck work alone takes 90 minutes to do, so there's no fast way around it. But we do it every time, whenever we do a setup, because that work is basically the core of making this guitar play well. It's all there are bits that have to work here, obviously, but it's in the action. It's the playing of the neck and the action of the strings over the neck and the precision of this neck that makes all the difference. So we do spend as much time as is necessary to get that right, and it does take quite a lot of time. So just while I'm here, I'm going to give this a quick naphtha rub down. I'm going to get rid of major greasy fingerprints. There's nothing that dirty on this guitar, to be honest, but it's always nice to give it a sort of an initial clean up, just to get rid of any baked on grease and grime. As a cookery program, but also I think it's quite good because you can, as you're going along, you can take a look at all the components and just see if anything just jumps out as being in a particular and very obvious state of disrepair. Now in this case, I've already had a sort of look over this guitar, and I have to say it's very encouragingly good condition. It's been very well looked after, apart from the stringing and the neck issues. So very hopeful for how this is going to turn out. And what I'm going to do is, while we're here, I'm really only doing a sort of fingerprint job at the moment, just getting the obvious dust and grease off on the guitar. But while we're here, I'm going to go now and spend just a minute or two just really getting the grease out of these frets. I can't stop this stuff rattling, I'm afraid. This is just how it is. Oh, maybe I can. Maybe I can't. So yeah, just getting in there and getting the finger goo away. It looks like it's been kept pretty clean. Somebody's probably done it with the evil Mr. Sheen that cannot be mentioned here in the workshop, the Reloved workshop. Okay, so quick once over, and that's in fairly clean condition. So just in order to give this its full treatment, I'm going to take the neck off, partly because it allows us to it makes it easier to do the neck work, but it also lets us just check, make sure everything under there is, well, make sure the joint is okay. It looks pretty good, no problems. But it also, while we're doing this, the thing to do at this point is to watch out for, make sure there's no shim, or if there is a shim in place, there is in fact a shim. In fact, there are two, to know exactly where they are. Is that two or is it more than two? Possibly even more than two. And there's any number of ways you can do this. Do whatever works for you. If I take a picture of it, at least I know where the shim is, and should it fall out, then I just need to put it back in place, and I need to know where the other little one is sitting in here. I'll show you in a second where it is. Yeah, so I now have a record. What I'm also going to do is just make a mark on here. Nobody ever sees this. So this is a 2000, according to this, 2001 neck, but here, God, the lighting in here is just, it's all clustered around here. Bringing it up closer to you doesn't make any difference at all. Okay, maybe you can see that. So there's a little shim, and it's done with a bit of it's kind of plastic webbing strap that might be used for packing case, you know, cardboard, securing cardboard boxes shut. So it's been cut there and placed there, and actually it can move. So I'm going to draw around it. So first off, I know exactly where it should live. Whoops, it's taking a little walk. But I want to put it back exactly in the same place, because if I don't, all that's going to happen is I'm going to get a different geometry out of my neck at the far end of it. If I move it, things won't sit in the same place. Now, on this guitar, I have a suspicion, judging by the state it was in beforehand, I may need to put an extra shim in this, because it didn't seem to be any way I was going to get that action low enough, given the geometry of the neck as was. But we'll come to that a bit later on, and if I can just show you, that's where the other one is. Very deliberate, very small, and it's placed in there, in this case, to tilt the neck. In this case, that shim there will tilt the neck a little bit that way, just a minute amount, but it's been put there for a reason. So I'm going to again draw around this, so that should I find this missing, which it's just done, it's just popped off. Now I'm now going to go and look at somewhere where I put something and I've forgotten where it is. Would like to, if I can remember where anything has gone, I would have liked to have glued that shim back into place. But there is something that says, I don't know where I've put that particular glue. Maybe it was in here, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was up there, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was behind here, maybe it's not. Aha, behind here. I knew I'd seen it somewhere today. Okay, so that little shim's dropped off, and I'm just going to use something very kind of uninspiring, like Evo stick. Really, just all I care about is it's going to sit back where it should be. and I don't want to use too much, which is quite hard when you're using this stuff. It's a little bit uncontrollable. Comes off in either just massive great blobs and you cannot control the flow of it because it keeps on coming out. And now I don't have any cloth to wipe my hand on, so toilet paper will have to do. Anyway, glue is always messy, isn't it? So I'm just taking some of the excess off, and then I'm going to push this back into place where it was before, and maybe just get a device to push it. It's not going to be, what's the word? It should stick if I'm lucky. What I just want to do is make sure it kind of stays in place. This other one is also moving around and has a, oh god, it's like snot, this stuff. Now I've got to be careful. This Evo stick is potentially, it will go on too thickly, and I may end up adding extra sort of thickness to the whole affair. So I've just got to be a little bit conscious of that and take down as much of it, take out as much of it as I possibly can, whilst leaving just enough to secure the shim in place, which I think that will probably do. I don't want to add millimetres of thickness to the whole proceedings. Okay, and then I'll just get that out of my way because my hands are sticky. Evo stick. I don't want it all over the guitar. Okay, so this neck, I will take off the. Normally, if these are in really good nick. Oh, actually, I don't need to take them off. They are in good nick. I was going to say, if I only take these off, I'm only going to take these off if there's a real need for it. But this is it is very good. I'm confusing it with a Affinity Strat neck I've got over there. So it's in very good condition. I can see there's some historic fret wear on this. I can see it's probably been treated, or somebody's tried to not level it perhaps, but at least polish the frets before. And down at this end there are some characteristic indentations on each of the, representing each of the strings. So we'll do the full neck job on that. But just for now, I'm going to hang it up out of the way so it doesn't come into any harm while I just take kind of stroll through. As you can probably see from here, we've got a collection of bits hanging up, necks and guitars in different states of repair. So it just joins those for the time being. Now coming back to this body, I've got that shim in place, and I'm just going to push it and make sure it is stuck as flat as possible. And there's some other bits and pieces of junk down here. Oh, there's another one I've just knocked off without seeing it. Thankfully, I did see where it came from. Gets out the glue again. Put a blob of glue on here, loose glue. Gets fingers dirty again, sticky. Goes back to blade. Picks up a bit of goo. Remembers where it is. Gives it a bit of stick. And positions it, and then gives it a little push, hopefully to stick it on again. Again, we've got to keep an eye on this because now I know where there is another shim supposed to be. It's got to stay there. So that one, yeah, one of them tilts it a little bit one way, another one pushes it just tighter against this wall. That's all it's doing, it's just pushing it a bit that way. And it's very, very subtle, and I suppose something you could imagine it's a bit comparable to is when you go and have your car wheel balances done, you know, and they spin it on that machinery which measures the sort of the imbalance of the forces as this thing goes spinning round, and it measures which part of the wheel has got kind of an excess weight on it because it's either out of shape or it's got leads placed in the wrong place. So this is a little bit like that. You're just making tiny adjustments, or the manufacturer is making tiny adjustments to make sure the neck is where they want it to be. Or, sorry, the neck seats how they want it to seat. So just looking at this now, what I will take off, if I can keep moving this around without any danger, I'm going to take off the tremolo springs. Actually, they're not under any great strain. So this guitar has got a tremolo arm, it's in the box inside. And what I will do is I will use Squier, what's his name? Frudua, who has a video all about how to set this tremolo system up perfectly, and I used it before on one and it was a very, very good video. I'm not sure I understood fully what was happening, but it really helped me to do it, so I was very grateful. Nice video. So again, with this construction, you have two screw-in pins that sit there. They're your kind of floating mount points. You can see them, I think you can probably see them as these little pinched blocks. But in looking at this, we can have a look under. Sorry, we can clear up underneath the tremolo arm, the tremolo block anyway. There's no harm in getting some of that gunge out of the way. It makes everything look just that little bit cleaner. And there's no real need to do this bit because, as far as I'm concerned, that the whole thing works. I'm assuming it works because it's in such good condition. But I might as well have a look and just see if there's anything catches the eye or is unusual under here. If not, then I'll give the edges of it a clean and put it right back together again. Okay, so what have we got? Okay, so we've got fairly tight, oh no, that's not too bad, reasonably tightly engineered little plate. And sometimes you don't have much room to manoeuvre, i.e. not much slack on the wiring. So you can see we've got the two single coils. We've got an interesting, I don't know if I've seen this brand of three-way switch before, sorry, five-way switch. I mean, what way of describing it is, but it's interesting. We've got the humbucker there, and a body shape which has been routed out to allow you to have, in fact it could be potentially two humbuckers in the front, the neck and bridge position, or you could have a front humbucker and two single coils, or you could have the rear humbucker and two singles going forward. So it's quite the routing pattern in here gives you a lot of options. But it also, when you lift up the cover, even though we assume everything's pretty much in good order, I can't see any problems. You always get a kind of high water mark underneath the pickguard cover. So I like to, just a little, I don't know, housekeeping thing, I like to give it a good clean, because we can get underneath this and just make that boundary between the finish on the outside and the underneath of, or the edge of the pickguard, just makes it really clean and sharp, because there's no sort of build-up of grime under there. And while I'm at it, this is, like I say, it is very tight fit, but while I'm at it I might just even try and just get some of the main bits of dust and grime off the inside of the scratch plate. It's just a bit of housekeeping, and one of the reasons, I suppose practical reasons you might want to do it, is because it's that dust and grime that eventually finds its way into the switch contacts. And if you do ever get any problems crackling, it's usually because some of that dust has ended up on the metallic contact. So no harm at all in giving that a little clean down. And then again, just checking that the edges around here are all free from grime and dirt when you put it back down. And I know that now is lovely and clean under there, and I can just pop these screws back into place. very lightly. Remember, this is plastic. You're not fixing down a piece of structural timber or piece of metal that has to carry a load. This is a little piece of plastic, and all it has to do is stop the components moving around. So as soon as it's touching the, as soon as it hits the deck, stop turning it. Because if you don't, what will happen is you'll end up sort of compressing and crimping the plastic, and potentially you might strip the whole of the wooden hull of its thread. Now, one other test or check I like to do at this point is two others actually. Is to check both the attachment of the thingy input, jack input or output. Some people call it input, some people call it output. Yeah, just check that to make sure that's properly fitted or tight, and then also check the strap attachment. Now I can feel a little bit of movement on there, but the movement is down at this end, not on the thing. So this is just, okay, that makes me think this has been stripped slightly. I'm just going to undo it. So we've got one of these little pickguard retaining screws, which has worn away the thread inside of the jack plate. Again, I'm just going to go around the edges of this so we get rid of the high tide mark of grease and goo. And if you have a problem like that and there's no bite on this, one of the things I found is quite useful to do and doesn't do any harm at all is just to cut yourself a little thinnest little bit of black masking tape. Not too much, you don't want to go too far. A little tiny strip of it, half that. So I'm saying this is probably about 15 millimeters of black tape, and just start by pinching it onto the screw. It doesn't really want to stay on there, but you can roll it round a bit, and once you roll it round, just break off most of it. You just want a kind of turn and a half round the pickguard screw itself, and then do it for the other one. And what that will help to do is it will just pad out the hole, and it kind of just gives a little bit extra grip where the actual hole has started to wear away. So it's kind of the other ways you might be able to do it, or you might want to do it, is you could put a bit of no more nails or something into the hole and let that dry. Excuse me, let that dry a bit. But either way, this works. You're just helping. Dear, you're just helping the screw to bite a little bit. God, I've got a bizarre frog in my throat. Okay, and that is quite nice. It just tightens that up where before it was just a little bit flapping. So miniature little details. I'm just checking my shims are still in place. Also bearing in mind that having already looked at the state of the height of the action on this guitar, I have a feeling that I might also have to add a shim under here to allow us to reduce this ridiculously high action. Sometimes if these looking grubby, I'll take these off, but actually they're looking pretty clean, so there's no need to give those knobs a clean. Somebody scratched the pickguard a little bit in terms of they've brushed it or they've cleaned it with something a bit abrasive. It is possible we could take that off and work on it for ages with one of these shining polishes, but I think that's a little bit excessive, and it would take us a lot of time. I think pickguards, are expected to bear the brunt of a bit of harsh treatment. Okay, so I'm going to hang this up, or place it down in the stand for now. And this is all in good order, and we're just going to get on with the kind of important work in the neck. I'm just raising these pickups a little bit. They seem to be a bit uneven, but yeah. So next stop, work on the neck and what we call the heart of the setup. And I'll talk you through a bit about why that's so in a moment when I put this down. Just cleaned up some of the guns in there. And lots of take care of every little detail you can. So you clean it out a little bit, tighten up things that need tightening up, and just give it a good check over. So come straight back to, I'm losing track which neck. We come back to the correct neck. I've got a few here. Back to the Squier Strat Standard series neck. And the first thing I'm going to do with this neck is I'm just going to look now, having taken it off and relieved it of its enormous strain. This neck is still like a banana. I don't know. And see if you can spot that. I can hold it as still as I possibly can. So can you see how bendy that is? So we need to take care of that. We need to do it whilst remembering that there is a shim here as well. What I'm going to do, because we're handling this, I'm gonna cover this shim with some tape. I'm not trying to stick it down exactly. What I'm trying to do is just make sure nothing snags it off and drops it somewhere else, because we really can't afford that. I don't want to be trying to guess what the size of the shim was in order to replace it. So a little bit of extra protection by courtesy of some masking tape here probably just do the job. I just need to remember when we get to the end there is in fact a shim that's got to be carefully uncovered. So maybe I'll even put danger shim, which I could do if I remember where I just put the pen. There it is. Little dotted lines. Shim. Shim. That tells me there's a shim there. Right. Okay. So what do we mean? Why are we doing? What work are we doing on this neck, and why? Well, the first thing we're going to do is to use the truss rod to try and straighten it out. That's a prerequisite for doing any fret work. So we want to aim for the straightest possible neck, which it isn't currently. But the reason we're going to do work on the neck, and the reason why I say this is the heart of the setup, all guitars come out of the factory. All. I mean, my leaderboard of shame over there will show you that every guitar we've had through, bar none, has a certain number of uneven frets. In fact, a very high number, and they range from the average percentage of frets which are uneven in respect of each other. The average number is around 60 plus 65%. Right? Some come in much lower, occasionally, very rarely come in at about 20%, the highest one. One at 20, one at 40, the rest at 65, 70, and some as bad as 80, 90. Which means that every guitar that you're handling at the moment, or you play or you own, unless you've done this particular work to it or somebody you know has done it, will have that many uneven frets. Now, why does that have any effect? You still can play the guitar, you sure can. The issue is, I wonder if I can I'll demonstrate it with. Let's just move this out of the way a minute. Floating pick guard that we don't really use. I'm going to use this long ruler. Let's see if I can demonstrate. But okay, so you have a string. Imagine the bottom of the ruler is a string, and you have a string coming over the nut at this end here, and as you know, it goes all the way up to the other end towards a bridge, and it sits on that bridge at a certain height. Right now, the first thing is, when you get a guitar, the height of that, the action that you know is the height of the strings above the frets, is I will suggest always dictated somewhat by the unevenness of the frets underneath. Because the frets are always uneven, there is a point as you go down with the action, so it might, let's imagine it's like that, you go down with the action, and the lower you go, you will inevitably hit one of the problems caused by the uneven frets, and it will be either choked notes or buzzing notes, or notes that you play 3 or 4 frets in adjacent to each other and they play the same note. And that's because a high fret is hitting the strings before it should. So on your guitar, usually the action of your guitar, the playing action, is set as low as you can go without hitting any of these problems. So people tend to, you probably know yourself, you might have got your guitar or bought a guitar from a friend or from an online retailer or a shop, and you start cranking the action down, you go down, 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 and oh my God, all the notes are choked and they're buzzing and zzz, 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 and they don't play. So what you do is you go back upwards a little bit until those buzzing choked notes have gone, and then you call that your action. Now, what we do here is to sort out the underlying frets first. And that's the first job in this whole setup. So once we level all the frets, you then have a much greater range of action. You can set, basically you can set your action much lower, but it gives you the option to choose to go low, as low as you really want, right down to most of the guitars that I do end up at 1mm or 1.5mm at the 22nd fret. That's an incredibly low action, right? You won't get that unless you've leveled all your frets in relation to each other. So that's why we do that. Once you've got the playing action you want, then we're also going to pay attention to the nut action at the other end, which has the height of the strings over the first fret here are dictated obviously by the overall height of the action here. If you imagine it as a triangle, that height is going to get narrower as you come down to this point. The height of the string over this fret is always going to be partly dictated by the height of your playing action. So if your playing action is really high, that height of the string over that first fret is going to be larger than if your action's beautifully low, in which case it's going to be a smaller height, a lower height. But even when you've got the perfect playing action set at this end, you will find on most guitars that the action over the first fret is still too high, and what it's telling you is you can't change that by lowering this anymore, but you have to adjust it here. And the reason you adjust it isn't just to make it play better, but that's one immediate benefit. The second, probably more important benefit, is when the action or the string is too high over the first fret here, pressing it down to make the string touch the first fret requires so much force that it makes the string go sharp. And it's very, very common that the problem can be caused by as little as 0.4 of a millimetre. So typically I find the guitars come to me with an action of about 0.6 of a millimetre over the first fret, and the ideal optimal action of that, a distance for that, when this action is correctly set at about 1.5 millimetres, a decent playing action. The optimal, or the common height of the string over the first fret should be about 0.25 of a millimetre, and usually it's about 0.6 or 0.5, which is way too high. And it's that quarter, it could be as little as a quarter of a millimetre's difference will be the difference between whether it plays a true note when you fret notes down here at this part close to the nut, or whether those notes you're fretting in Fs or Ds or Gs or Cs, those kind of open chords that we will start with. That quarter of a millimetre's difference can make the difference between those chords being in tune and ringing really clearly and perfectly intonated, or being slightly ugly and out of tune and just muddy and really jarring and don't seem to fit with the music or what else you're playing, or the other open notes even. And I can't stress how important that is and how big an impact it has. So kind of micron for micron, this is probably the biggest problem on all guitars, along with the underlying uneven frets. And then when we get the frets leveled, and when we get the action sorted this end, and then we get the action sorted this end, and then we intonate each individual string, and then you have a guitar that feels completely different. Right? So a bit of a long introduction, but that's what we do, and that's why this whole process let's imagine this process without me talking about it, but this whole process takes me, as you'll see in a moment, about 90 minutes. And you have to ask yourself, if it takes me 90 minutes, you start to understand why it's not done in any of the, probably highest likelihood it hasn't been done in any, if not most, if not all of the guitars you've got or seen or played. Because that 90 minutes minimum, and then there's another about an hour and a half to do the action and the intonation. So let's call it 3 hours to get this guitar playing the way it should, or the way to live up to its potential. Does a couple of things. First of all, it proves that this guitar, all the components of this guitar are absolutely perfectly good enough to be an awesome playing guitar. And that's what I get the most pleasure out of when people come and pick up a budget guitar that plays better than probably any £1,000 Fender they've played, because we've really done these few things really well. So it proves to you that budget guitars are entirely capable of playing brilliantly. But it also starts to kind of make you realise why it's not done in the factory, or it's not done in the shop that you bought it from, or the online retailer. And the reason for that is quite simple, I think, and that is because your budget guitar, your Squier Stratocaster, is a product of a price war with a bunch of manufacturers competing with each other to make the best budget guitar with the right features and so on. But they're all fighting against each other's price war. They're all competing with each other to see who can strip out the most costs by moving it to China, by producing it with the biggest economies of scale, buying the most bulk materials, and so on and so on and so forth. But at the end of all of that chain of cost cutting and cost saving is you, the customer, who is only prepared to pay 140 quid new, or whatever, or 180 quid, whatever it is that this costs new in its kit, right? So you're there putting the pressure. You won't pay more, and because you won't pay more, and I understand that, we're all like that, but because we, the customer, won't pay more, they, the manufacturer, will have to produce this in a kind of in whatever way that turns them a profit and makes it a viable business. And one person spending 4 hours doing what I'm about to do to make this guitar play brilliantly. Imagine, you can't afford that in that business model where the margins are so tight. Where's that that half a day of an employee's time coming from? Even at the Chinese labour rates, for example, it's still going to add a cost to the production of this, which you, the customer, in your search for cheaper and cheaper guitars, looking at who's selling it cheapest, and you're going to go with the one who can provide you what looks like the best guitar for the least money. They're not going to add this cost back into that, and they've made a compromise. So they've said, look, most people will just grab this. They like the logo. It's nice wood, looks beautiful, feels great, paint job lovely, all the things you can see, okay, and touch, and look blingy. They get right, and they try not to skimp on it. And then they say, okay, what are the hidden things that we can get rid of? Well, most people don't know what intonation is. Bin it. Frets, you crank this up to 4mm at the bottom end, and they'll play it. And the frets will look level to me, right? Bin trying to level the frets and get that right. Nut action. Oh God, a guy spending 30 minutes getting that right with a little file. Forget it. Just chuck the nut in. As long as it's above the first fret, no more than about a millimetre, just send it out. And so, in a sense, we're all to blame. We want the cheaper products new, and those cheaper products force people to leave out the kinds of things that are less visible, and that includes setting this up right. And that's why those people who finally get around to understanding that that's what's missing in these guitars, in other words, they stop buying guitar after guitar hoping to find this hidden quality or component. When somebody stops looking for it, they realise that actually it's true. You can have it in any guitar you've even got here. If you do that final work, those 3 or 4 hours that I do, then you realise that you won't get it by buying more and more guitars, or even you won't even get it by buying a £1,000 Gibson. I went last weekend. I went to a music store, pulled a £1,000 Gibson off the wall, checked the distance between over the first fret of the strings, and they were about 0.7 of a millimetre. And I did a test there, and then I photographed it with my with an amp. I was playing in one of the sound booths, and I tuned up the guitar beautifully with my app, and then I played the open E string, big E string, low E string, nice and perfectly in tune. Fretted an F note on the first fret, and it was F, but F with sharp by about, I don't know, whatever it was, a third of a tone. I mean, it was, varying between a third and a fifth of a tone sharp of the F. And so there you have a £1,000 guitar straight from America. If you ask them why they're £1,000, because they would tell you, because it's all the attention to detail and the craftsmanship. And you've got £1,000 guitars, £2,000 guitars hanging on the wall in a music store, and they still have the action so high at the nut that you will go sharp on playing your open, the notes in your open chords, any of the fretted notes around this part of the guitar. So they aren't. Where is the craftsmanship if they're not doing that? And I gently and politely sort of inquired of the people in the music shop, did they do this work when they got these £2,000 guitars out of the box from America? And they don't. They assume that the Gibsons are good enough and that the craftsmanship is worth the $2,000 or pounds, and they hang it on the wall. And someone like me, who now has a bit of understanding, which I didn't have before, but come in and test it out, and they're as bad as a £30 Encore guitar in that respect. And I can make a £30 Encore play and feel better than those £2,000 Gibsons hanging on the wall. I can't make them look as sexy, and I can't make the brand name make people swoon and fall over. But technically, you can make a Fender Squier Strat Standard series play as good as any off-the-shelf Fender guitar that you can go and spend £1,000 or £1,500 on. And that's why these are turning out to be so popular when we put them through the Reloved workshop. Simple as that, because they are so damn good. Because everything's here, and so is everything here in the basic Squier Strats. The Affinity Strats are just brilliant, set up crappily, just like all of them. Okay, so I'm going to take a break, but I'll come back and we'll get straight into this. Okie dokie, cup of tea later. First thing to notice is I've started to use the truss rod to get this thing, what's the word, level. So I'm having to work fairly hard and with the truss rod to level this neck, but we're getting there. Well, I think we're getting there. Still got a bit of bend in it. Doesn't feel hugely positive when I get this in there. It doesn't help, by the way, that we've got this string tree in the way. They can make making adjustments quite tricky. Right. So I've had to use a fair bit of force there to level this out, and as I say, not force exactly, but it's quite fairly stiff, and we're not there yet. That's still a little bit too fraction too bendy for my liking. Must remember to set the guitar, set the phone off. Okay. So yeah, important thing, get this thing level before we attempt any fret work. Just picked up a comment on a YouTube video just now from a chap who was watching. I don't like the way this is. Okay, now we've gone into just about level mode. Yeah, from a guy who was saying he watched the fret leveling videos, or video on a Korean. I think one of the last ones, most recent ones I did on a Korean Squier, and he was saying that he felt that the fret leveling tool was a bit too aggressive for him, and that's quite understandable. It can look really harsh. Right, that's better. Wow, that is really better fit than this one for some reason. I was starting to round off. Yeah, so he's saying the fret leveling file from StuMac. I think it was a fret leveling file. He was commenting on, not the fret crowning file. Actually, I got my fret leveling file from Crimson Guitars, and in a way, it really is. There's no doubt about it. It is aggressive, and you've got to have a bit of nerve to use it, because there's no turning back. You'll see in a little while with this that when it comes to it, you are taking off material off the top of the frets. There is no, you can't undo that. If you do it wrong, or it's taken too much off, that's it. You're stuck with it. So I can understand, and I didn't have time to reply, but if he's watching this, I suppose the thing to notice, and I'll finish one sentence first. The thing to notice is, if you find that fret leveling file approach too aggressive and a bit too rough, you can use a much slower and sort of softer approach using sandpaper to do the same sort of job. It's slightly different technique, but it is much more controlled. It's much slower and much less aggressive. It's perfectly possible to do it that way. So for some people, that's a really good way of doing it. Okay. In fact, Thomas, my stepson, who sometimes see on these videos, he learned to do it that way, the sandpaper way, and he described this file as evil because it frightened him. He didn't want to use it, so he characterised it. We made a joke out of it, but he wanted to stick to the other method for a very long time, and I've still yet to get him to practice a bit more with the fret leveling file. Okay, so having done a few tweaks on this thing, I am just about level. Kind of hard to see sometimes. You have to find a nice edge or surface that you can just get a good sight down the neck. It's a mixture. On this edge, it's just about level, or if not, a microbe on the convex side. And this side is still a tiny bit on the concave side, but we're going to have to compromise with between the two, and that's as near as we're going to get. And so the next bit to get ready for this, once we've levelled the neck or straightened the neck, the next bit is we really have to take time and protect the fingerboard, which we want to make sure it doesn't get scratched or in any way damaged by what we're doing. So this is where good old masking tape comes in handy, and you just get the masking tape and make sure it covers the fingerboard but goes right up to the edge of the fret. So just butt up to the edge of the fret with your tape, and you can see that obviously to begin with your single strips of tape, whatever, on this average normal size tape, you can see that you can use these big strips and they double up a little bit. But you're going to have to go smaller when you get up there. So in a moment we're going to switch into cutting a whole load of strips, or cutting a load of strips we can use. And to do that I'm going to use a craft knife and a cutting board, and it just looks a bit finicky, but actually cutting it with a ruler and a cutting board is probably the simplest way of doing it, and it makes sure that you have straight edges that you can run up to the edge of your frets. If you try and do it by tearing tape or ripping it down the middle, you'll get wavy lines, and it will not. You'll leave gaps in your fingerboard, will show through, and then it will run the risk of being damaged. So you can see straight away that on this one, I probably just exactly the right width, just cover. We're just about almost going to have to start cutting. We'll get the next one done, and then we'll have to cut. But it's the only way to protect it, and you really have to take the time to do it. So when we get to this spot here, what I tend to do is I tend to pinch the tape around the back, because it just makes it one hell of a lot easier to get off later on, and I'll show you how. Right, so I sort of make it a load of grab tabs like that. But we're now at the stage where the full-size tape won't fit between the frets. So what I need to do is to switch into kind of my production production line for tape. A few bits left over from before. So quite simple. Just get, I think probably, to just make this work quickly, I'm going to get 4 strips of tape lined up on here, full length of this little piece. And it's, how long is it? Well, it's long enough to cut this into 4 and to go around the neck of the guitar. So whatever that equals, I don't know, but it shouldn't be too hard to work it out for you if you're doing this. So there's my 4 strips of tape, which I'm now going to start cutting with a long ruler and a sharper knife so I can summon them up for the moment. Just going to cut the loose edges off because I'm like that. Makes me comfortable to have untidy edges. Right. So what I'm going to do is 2 of these pieces I'm going to cut in half long ways, and 2 I'm going to cut into 3 long ways. So first of all, the two in half long ways, and I'm just going to use this big long ruler. It's not perfect, it doesn't have to be 1,000,000% exact. You're just aiming to get the tape cut roughly in 2 even sized strips. So you're just guessing it, you don't need to measure it with millimetre perfect. Okay, so there are my 2 cut into 2s. Now I'm just going to go for 3s. And again, just guessing it. Done this enough times now, but it's not critical. As long as it's in 3 bits, you'll find some pieces thin enough to get into the protect the frets, the fretboard in between closer together frets. You may hear some fireworks going off tonight. It's November the 5th, which in the UK means it's time to remember the gunpowder plot on Parliament way back in the 17th century, where Guido Fawkes, that's completely missed, they've gone off onto a complete wrong cut there. Yeah, where Guido Fawkes and some accomplices tried to blow up the English Parliament by putting barrels of gunpowder underneath the Houses of Parliament, and was caught red-handed just before. Again, I've gone off onto a complete detour. Same place. Caught red-handed and ended up paying for that with his life. And so, bizarrely, in the UK, and we celebrate presumably the fact that he didn't get through with it every year with fireworks, which is an extremely expensive and dangerous way of throwing away loads of money. Oh, and frightening all the domestic animals that we love. Okay, so I'm moving along, and I'm now using my bits that are cut into 2s, and for the first few frets after this, they're barely going to overlap, so I may just kind of join them together in the middle with an extra bit so that there's a bit of crossover. But having cut it in advance just makes this thing a lot easier, and I know it's a bit anal for some people, but if you do this enough times, you're going to want to do it in a way that's dependable and doesn't change or cost you more time each time. So as you can see, when I first learned about doing this, it was I'm not quite sure what made me want to do it. I think it was partly that I bought a guitar that was quite a good brand and quite expensive, but just would not play well. And I'm the kind of person who eventually I will just have a go at doing it myself, because I hate to feel disempowered and that you know, something. It was a problem that I couldn't solve, so it was like a red rag to a bull. So I kind of worked it out. But the thing that really did astonish me was the fact that it wasn't done in the factory, and then I kind of worked out, I suppose, the money side of it, and the fact that these companies work to such small profit margins, despite us thinking they're multi-million pound. Well, they are multi-million pound businesses, but you know, the point is the profit margins are very small, and they make money, make a lot of money, but they only make it because they sell large volumes. And once you sort of understand that, you can start to realise that quality and added value in this kind of way can't really feature in that, because it just would be way too expensive. So it was really great to sort of reach a point where, after having played the guitar for about 30 years, I just thought, I've got to learn something about this. I really want to know what the hell's going on here. And so I think it's lucky that I started to want to know about that in the days of the internet and YouTube, and it's all there. All that information is brilliant. You can get hold of it if you've got the time, patience to search for it. And like all things on the internet, even like this video, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, and you have to weigh it up against other things you've seen and heard, and you come to your own conclusion about what works and what doesn't. And I always try to say, don't take. That's why I don't really ever want to get into. Well, I don't want to get into arguments with anyone about doing things a certain way. It's no point thinking you know the right way to do it or the only way to do it. It's just if you find one way of doing it that works or seems to work, then you kind of have a reason why you do it that way, and you carry on doing it that way. And if it works, if what I do works successfully for you until you find something better, then that's great as well. But I certainly have never been interested in having those kind of long-winded, hateful arguments about who's fine details of, I don't know, tone woods and what finish to use, and what you cannot use with this and what you must use with that, and the fact that you've put your tape on the wrong way, and you must never put masking tape glue against the fingerboard because it will cause warpage of the, I don't know, whatever. I mean, there's some obvious things that if they're good pieces of information, you can evaluate them, and if it's like all rational things, if there's a good reason for it, a good argument, and it makes sense to you, then you tend to incorporate it into your kind of your modus operandi or your worldview or whatever. So that's how I learned it. I just picked up things or listened or heard things that made sense and tried them out. And probably would stick to those things until, I don't know, we find something makes more sense that comes along. So what's nice is when you do have a kind of an idea about something and you try it out 50 times and it seems to produce the results every time, you can be fairly sure, kind of a bit like science and experimentation, but you can be fairly sure that you're onto something repeatable, and that isn't about your having a view and being right about it. It's demonstrable and it works. And I think that's what's nice about doing this, is that I've reached a point where I can confidently kick off every one of these guitars and know that it will play better at the end than it did at the start, for doing the same series of dependable or predictable, similar range of predictable things. And far from making it boring, actually, it's really nice to be able to do that, because it's really great to have that confidence, to be able to not be worrying about, oh, can I make this play? Or, you reach a point where you've done it enough times to know that this will improve it. And if in the very rare occasion that it doesn't, it'll be because you have a truss rod that's broken and you just cannot get the neck out of a banana shape, and therefore you can't do much with it. And those are, so far, I don't think I've actually hit one of those. But if I do, you'll have to accept once in a while that there can be things wrong that you just can't overcome. Certainly not without spending loads of money and it just being a whole lot more complicated than is worth it for what you're doing. But anyway, so all of that aside, just going to lovely toasty heater down again. So what I've got here is a nicely protected neck, masking tape. There's no wood poking through anywhere, and if at any moment or any time throughout the whole of the process with the neck the masking tape comes off for one reason or another, then we stop and put some more on without fail, because if it's a customer's guitar you cannot afford to ruin the fingerboard just because you couldn't be bothered to stop and put some more tape on. So I'm just going to do a double check and say, okay, I'm comfortable, this is pretty much flat, and it's as flat as we're going to get it, because I know how stiff that truss rod now is. So if you were going to do this, then there are kind of 3 stages to it from this point onwards. There is levelling the frets, which when you use a levelling tool like this is pretty straightforward because it does them all in one go. What it also does is it kind of follows the radius of the guitar. If it was a big wide thing, you would effectively be flattening the radius by going down the middle and kind of scraping everything flat. But because it's relatively narrow and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you sort of follow the radius in a series of tangents, whatever you might call it. So it does preserve the radius of the frets to a great extent. And actually that was interesting because it was a question that somebody asked on YouTube comment the other day. You can also buy radius blocks, which are a different way of levelling this set of frets. So if, let's say that was a 15-inch radius or something, then you can buy a block which is kind of like shaped like that, which has a concave surface. It's a long, long block of wood with a concave trench running all the way down it, and into that you fix your Velcro, wet and dry or whatever, the abrasive paper. And because that radius there is exactly the same as the guitar you're using, you just go all the way down and it does it. Fret levels all to the exact same radius. That's another way of doing it. They're quite expensive as well, but also it means you have to have one for every single radius of guitar you use, so it can get quite expensive if you're doing this as a trade or a business or something, because you'd need several. But it's also appealing because it's just like brain off, done. This is a little bit more delicate. You've got to go down the edge, tilt it a bit, come over, right over the top, tilt towards the edge. You're sort of playing a little more jockeying with this a little bit more, but I haven't had any problems with this so far. So even though when people are saying, well, how does it follow the radius? Well, technically it's true. You are kind of following the radius in a series of digital steps, but by and large you are following the radius, which is fine. Okay, so if you were doing this, you're going to do 3 steps. First step, aside from all this covering up the neck fingerboard, first step is the fret leveling. With a tool like this, you don't need to mark anything. You just go, if I scrape my way down this and make sure every fret's being kind of ground down a bit, I will level the frets to the same level as each other. The second part of it is to reshape each fret so that once you've leveled it, each fret has a certain flat spot on it, and you don't want that, so you're going to use another tool afterwards, or I will use another tool to re-profile the shape, the nice kind of smooth profile of each fret looked at from the side. So instead of something with a flat top, it's going to go back to being something with a nice rounded profile, and that's done with a nice little concave file like this with diamond bits on it. And then the third and final part of this process is to get various grades of sandpaper, and we will then repolish all these frets up to a plain playable standard, finishing off with a Dremel at the end. Once that's done, we take all this tape off and we've got a neck that's ready now to rejoin the body. So 3 stages. In this case I'm going to add a stage at the beginning out of sheer idle curiosity. You see over there we've got the leaderboard, of the fret leaderboard of shame, and it just tells me which of the guitars that have come through here recently have the best and worst record as far as level frets are concerned. So right at the top, a vintage V100 Les Paul, which actually we sold a week or so ago, and actually is coming back because there was a fault with the electrics. Oh well. So we're going to see that baby again, but that had the lowest. 15 to 20% of the frets on the neck were uneven, and that was quite remarkable and rare, judging by all the rest of these, where the next best contender was a Charvel San Dimas. It's about a £600 guitar, Next best after that was a Jackson Adrian Smith SDX, I think it's called, guitar. All of these these two Super Strat style guitars. Then after that we go down to a vintage SG brand, a vintage brand SG in black, and then we're into the Fender region, which is kind of like all in the 50s to 65s. We've got a load of Squier Strat Affinity series. We've even got a Fender made in Mexico with half of its frets, pretty average, half of its frets uneven. And then we go into the really surprising territory where we've got an Ibanez RG series, expensive, well-made, beautiful guitar, 70% uneven frets. We have an expensive Bernie Les Paul copy with 75% of its frets uneven, right the way down to I think the kind of worst one of the lot. In fact, it's hanging on the wall inside. It's been done now, and it's listed on eBay. But a vintage SG in cherry, beautiful cherry colour, with 90% of its frets uneven. That's almost, well, I think there was one or possibly two of the whole lot that didn't have that weren't uneven. So, and that vintage SG cherry was worse even than my 1980s Sun Mustang from India, which only had 83% of the frets uneven. So coming back to this thing, this extra stage at the beginning, I'm going to do just so we can see how many, we can count how many uneven frets there are here, and then add it to our leaderboard of shame. You wouldn't need to do this. You just need to worry about leveling, reprofiling, and polishing. But I'm going to do checking for my leaderboard, leveling, reprofiling, polishing. Okay, so let's just get on and do. So here we are. So the checking bit for the leaderboard. So to do that, I'm going to use a couple of things. I'm going to use a pencil, a pen, marker pen, permanent marker pen, and this thing called a fret rocker. A fret rocker is just a piece of straight edge metal which has different length sides, because what I want to be able to do at any check is I want to have 3 frets underneath the straight edge at one time. And what I do when I check for levelness, I just try to rock it backwards and forwards on the middle fret. And if I can rock it on the middle fret, it shows me that that middle fret is higher relative to one or other of these two. Now it doesn't tell me the truth, it doesn't tell me that is actually high compared to what, I don't know, the surface of the earth or whatever. It just tells me that in relation to these two, there is some discrepancy. And then if I move it to there and I get the same thing, I know that there's a discrepancy between this one and those two. It doesn't tell me empirically that this is high or that is low. It just tells me they're uneven in relation to each other. And that's all we need to know. So sometimes you can you can overthink it and try and work out, you know, which one is actually high and which one looks high because the one next to it's low. It doesn't really matter. You just get a bit head knackered, brain phase if you try and figure that out, because it's all about relative evenness, and that's all you need to really worry about. So we just fire straight away into our check. So nice, first one, clear. Oop, little tiny bit, and our second one. So I'm just going to mark with my green pencil. Just going to do a little mark here on either side of the fret where I noticed the problem, then move to the next fret. I'm very impressed already. This guitar is now already an outstanding performer in our Hall of Shame fame. Because I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and only 2 have shown up as slightly uneven, which is great. Ooh, I have a feeling this character is going up to the top of the leaderboard as we speak. No. Okay. Wow. So, what can I say? Somebody has already done this. Or we got lucky in the factory. What do we know? What can we say? Problem with this checking thing is, of course, it is not and cannot be scientific or conclusive, and any way, if we know that it has 50% uneven frets, we can't tell much more about it than that. We don't know whether the one that has no uneven frets is because it came out of the factory that way, or it was came out with 100% and was put right by a luthier or guitar tech. So we don't really know much. All we know is what we have in front of us. But it's a good cross section of what is floating around out there in the world, and allows us to make some conclusions about the number of guitars out there which just aren't set up very well, and that people like you and me will be struggling to play. Another good thing about doing this fret leveling process, which we will be doing in a moment, is that it allows us to clear up any surface wear. So where we've got the strings that have worn a groove down, we'll get rid of that in a minute, or where there's a chip where somebody's dropped something, or the guitar's fallen over and I hit the floor and pressed the string into the metal of the fret is quite often common. So the fret leveling process will also basically clear up all of that damage, or take away most of it. Sometimes it's just the minor string grooves down here. Sometimes it's a deeper gouge, and when you find that it's a deeper gouge, you do have a bigger challenge on your hand. Or actually when it's a low spot where somebody, in a patch where somebody's played lead guitar heavily for years and they've worn a couple of strings right down, frets right down. Sometimes it can be very hard to bring everything else down to that level. You have to go do quite a lot of hard work, and that can feel quite daunting, because if you're really taking away loads of material just for the sake of getting one dent removed. But actually, if you think about it, you have to do that. You're in the world of fret dressing or fret leveling, you are working to the lowest blemish, if you like, on your frets, in your neck. And really, when you're doing that, the main question that you're facing is, do you have enough metal to do it? And if you don't, you're then considering, do I need to replace a fret? Is that particular hole going to be so deep that I have to replace? It'd be better to replace a fret than to wear all these others down to the same level. And there's no real, I can't say what you need to do. You have to make a judgment on each case on its benefits, merits, I should say. Okay, so I'm just going to mark these a bit in black so we can see a bit clearer. It's pretty good. I'm quite impressed. Squier Strat Standard series. The little areas that I did find were quite minor, so not only less than usual, but also a lot milder problems than usual. I'm going to put this out of the way. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. I never assume I know, because sometimes it's 21. So 22 frets. Take the 2 we can't check, which is the first and the last one. We've got 20, of which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are uneven, and that, in my book, equals 35%, which is a pretty great score. Puts it right somewhere near the top of the leaderboard, and it's actually better than the 35% because they're so mild. They're very mild unevenness problems. So we have the Squier Strat Standard, but they've all, if I remember, the standards have all been fairly good. I've had about 3 already through here, but they're all a bit better. So there's something that happens to them, I think, in the factory. We can't be conclusive. It may be that the owners are more likely to do something about it because they're more serious musicians' guitars. I don't know. Oops, I need to move something. But the point is, whatever the reason, there is a sort of, in my experience so far, there is a pattern that Squier Standards. Oh god, I'm losing pin. It's not really the best designed leaderboard in the world. Not in a sensible setup. Yeah, so there's something about the Squier Standard that seems to combine to end up with the basic score being quite good. Right, okay, so what I'm going to do, and this is what you would probably do as well if you were just doing fret leveling, is I'm going to now take the marker pen, permanent marker, and I'm just going to draw a black line across the top of all these frets. And this marker pen and this line is really useful because it helps me to see where the file has taken away metal from the frets, and it's a really good kind of monitor, I suppose you could call it. If you're ever doing this on a guitar with a maple neck, take great care with the marker pen, because when you're using masking tape to protect the fingerboard, the edge of the masking tape has a strange capillary action. So if the pen touches the edge of either side of the masking tape where it touches either side of the fret, it'll suck the ink straight down underneath the masking tape onto the fingerboard. And I have spent quite some time in the past sanding off permanent marker. Anyway, let's come in a bit closer, and what you'll now be able to see will be, I'm going to now just take this, take the fret leveling file, and I'm just going to fire away. It's quite nice at this stage, there's nothing I have to actually, nothing I have to watch out for in doing this. I just need to get on and scrape away on the top of the thing, because that's all we need to do. It's just, this isn't gonna, just want something that's going to keep it from rocking. That's right. Yeah, so there's no, I don't have to measure or gauge anything. I'm just going to now use this file to remove the black marker pen off all of these frets, and when that's happened I will know that I've taken some off all of them, and I'll know that I've done it evenly. So I'm just going to start down here and try, and this is, I kept catching my sleeve the other day, I'm going to try to get as smooth a run down here as possible without missing the first few frets, because it's sometimes quite hard to start from a standing start and apply the same pressure as all the rest of the frets get in the middle. So I'm just also tilting a bit out towards the edge to get the very edge of these frets, and then coming back inwards towards the middle. So you can see I'm moving in strips across the radius of the neck. And then at this point I'm just going to quickly stop, and I will just brush away the metal, because you've got quite a bit of rough metal swarf or filings or whatever you want to call it. And I'm just looking to see, okay, that's shiny, I've cut that, that's cut. There's a tiny little gap running down the middle here which I haven't done, so it's common on all the frets, so I'm just going to run down that section here a little bit, and that's taking it away. What I'm also going to do is just turn the file round and just come down this end and run right off this edge. And that just helps me to catch all the parts of the frets that I haven't reached, because I'm sort of, normally when you start this end it's very difficult to start as if you were moving when you're not moving. You're starting from scratch, so it kind of takes you a while to get up to speed, and so coming this way again helps you come off the end here at speed, which gives it an even cut. Okay, so I'm pretty much covered everything. There's one fret here that hasn't been touched in a little spot, but it's the last fret and it's not going to cause a problem, so I'm not going to cut any more away. What I will do, first thing to always do is once you've done the first thing, if you have marked up where it's uneven, if you've done that, it's quite useful to do. But if you really want to reassure yourself, you can go back to the bits you've marked as uneven and check them. And after that treatment, you're pretty well sure. 99% of the time, it'll have taken away any of the uneven problems that you had. Occasionally, right at the edges of things, you may still find a tiny bit of rocking, and you just go over that area again lightly with the file. But this is all, it's all done. Can't find any more movement at all. There is one, it's great, there's one little tiny bit here and I can see it's been missed. So it's so sensitive that both the visual thing is telling me there's a little bit of black marker pen, and this rocker is telling me that's still a little bit higher than everything else. So I'm just going to run off the end here with that in mind, and that I think will be absolutely spot on. Hope the cats are alright. Okay, so that's the first half of stage 1 of 3. No, what am I talking about? That's part 1 done. We've levelled the frets. They are now level. Sorry, my mistake. So what I'm now going to do is, having levelled the frets, we find the marker, the permanent marker pen again. How strange. Managed to lose that one I had out. Okay. Okay, once you've levelled the frets, then you take the marker pen again and you run again across the top of all the frets, whether they were uneven or not. Every fret now has been cut by the file, and we're going to now run the pen across the top of all of them. And this now the pen this time will provide a slightly different, similar but a slightly different function. So this time, instead of going long ways to level the frets, this time we're going to work on each fret individually to reshape it, to get rid of that flat spot, but to do it in a way that doesn't take the fret itself down any lower. I suppose a way of showing this, I'm good with a picture. I don't know how clearly you can see this, but let's see little drawings from other times. Okay, so I guess just as principle, we began. We began with a fret that was that shape, but it was too high, so we kind of chopped the top off it, okay, with the file, and then what we ended up with was a fret that looks like this, with a flat top and a rounded edge. And that's no good, because not only has the intonation point moved from the top here, okay, to the edge here, right? So that's, first of all, the intonation will be wrong. Secondly, we know that this top part of this fret now has got deep gouges from that file, and those gouges made by this file are, you know, incredibly rough. They're, I don't know if well, they don't have a grit value, but you know, it's like 0 grit. It's like taking a nasty file and scraping the top of the metal. So we've got a flat spot with a load of nasty scratches, really deep scratches. So what are we going to do? Well, we need to reshape it into a lovely round fret that we can then polish up, but we have to do it without dropping this height any further. So if we just attack the top of the fret, we'd end up reducing the height of the fret, and that would then make the frets uneven again in relation to each other. We wouldn't know we wouldn't know how to, whether we'd gone too far on one or you know, lowered one in relation to another. So the technique we use is quite nifty. We use a concave file. It sits on top of the fret like that, and it's got diamonds all on the underside. And when it comes down and touches this flattened fret, it cuts off the edges first, and eventually it, that's the best way to draw it. What it does is it kind of reshapes the fret into a nice curved fret again, but it leaves that middle bit absolutely the exact same height as it currently is, because we know they're all flat and all level now. So once we finish that, then we have a nicely levelled fret with the tiniest flat spot on top, because you still have a little strip on top. and that's what the black marker is for, because this strip on top, we cut down with this file until this strip gets narrower and narrower and almost disappears, but we leave a little black strip running along the very central ridge, top ridge of the newly shaped fret. And so long as we leave that black strip untouched, we know that we haven't lowered this part of the fret any further. All we've done is we've rounded off the shoulders, if you like. And so now we're in a position now we can now attack this nice rounded fret with sandpaper, finer and finer, and we'll be basically keeping this height almost exactly the same as it was. And if it goes down at all with the sandpaper, we're taking all the frets down at exactly the same rate, so that we're left with a set of frets that are relative to each other, completely level, reshaped and rounded, but also smoothed and polished. And that's what we're about to head. Well, we're about to head into the reprofiling part. This is the sanding part. We've done the fret leveling. That's the reprofiling part, and this is the sanding part, the third stage. This is critical. If we get this right, the guitar plays beautifully. If we get it wrong, it's the strings catch on scratches so small we can't see, but the fingers will find them very quickly, and it will make the guitar horrible to play. So we have to get this bit, and that's why I call this the heart of the setup, because if we get this right, then it's a really good. We get a really good setup. So I take out my my medium diamond file, and it's quite a simple process. I'm going to switch glasses for this because I want to start to look at this in quite some detail to make sure it's as good as it can be. So I use this file and I just go over the top of the fret, and straight away what I can see is that I'm getting a silver line on either side of the fret, down each side of the fret, and that's the inside edges of this file cutting the sticking out shoulders of this flattened fret, and it will keep doing that, and we can see down the middle of this fret I can see an untouched line, relatively untouched line of black marker pen. So we keep on going with this concave file until we have the thinnest black line possible, and then we stop. And once we've done that, we know we have reshaped that fret but left its height in the critical central part as same as it was before. And that's what's so good about this technique, that it keeps you control, and you know that you end up with a set of frets which are beautifully levelled but also now reshaped. So you can see it doesn't take that long. These diamond coated files are very, very effective. If you go too far, you could carry on and keep going so that you erase all of the black marker and start cutting down and taking more of the fret away. If you want to do that, you can, but you'll basically create for yourself an uneven fret, which sort of goes completely undoes everything you've done so far. So it'll have wasted a good hour or whatever it's taken so far. Now I just saw a little bit of this fingerboard becoming exposed there, so I'm just going to add some more masking tape. So I don't want to spoil the fingerboard at all. Okay, so I'm going to do this, and also I am going to come back when it's finished, but I'm going to listen to the radio for a minute. So see you in a second. Okay, so I've skipped a bit of time here because I was listening to stuff on the radio, so I just finished the Dremel stage. So I've been through the polishing, well, sandpapering and polishing regime to finish up, and I'm now pretty much ready to remove the masking tape. So we did fret leveling, reprofiling, reshaping the fret, and then polishing, sanding and polishing. So now we have a clean, shiny set of frets that are all level. And now we can use the tape to kind of basically fairly easily pull off the well, there's little tags help you to pull off the tape, and then we can just rip it all off from the front. Then the whole of this process is pretty messy, so you will need to give the neck another clean, because a lot of this goo will have come off. The metal filings and dirt and all that grubby stuff on the other side will have got onto the neck. It's inevitable. but it's okay, it comes off very easily. So with a quick, what's that stuff? Napalm? Yeah, quick napalm. We'll get the whole thing cleaned up and we'll be ready to get it back onto the body. And then we're moving forwards into the process of putting the strings back on, loading it up with string tension, getting the neck set correctly for adjusting the action, and then into the process of adjusting the action fully. So I'm just being a little cautious here to make sure I can get the masking tape off without pulling off the little shim we had earlier on, which is still in place, which is good. To make sure everything is as it was before. But I did say before, there's a sense that we may need to have another shim in there, because the height of the action was originally so bad, so high, that I couldn't see that we would get a playable action by making adjustments alone to the bridge and the bridge saddle. So I had a feeling when I first saw this guitar that a shim may be necessary. So I'm going to proceed with that thought in mind, although quite how big a shim and exactly where it would go is another issue. But so right now I'm just working to get all the masking tape off, which has done a very good job in keeping the fingerboard or the fretboard, whatever we want to call it, clean and protected. And this tape all comes off in nice big grubby chunks, and then we can just check around. Okay, everything's looking good. Chuck all this rubbish away. Don't quite quickly build up a lot of rubbish. I've got a whole bag full. Every weekend it seems to get refilled. So I'm going to chuck on some naphtha, lighter fluid, a good safe cleaning solvent. I'm just going to go over the frets again, give them a quick going over. Sometimes you get a bit of masking tape, marker pen on the sides of the frets, and you might as well take that away if you can. But this is generally just about getting rid of some of the detritus that gets kicked up in the fret leveling process. So you get a nice clean neck as you come to put it back on the guitar now. So I'm just going to do just a little bit of tidying up, move things out of the way, put things within arm's reach but out of the way so that we've got the room we need for the next bit. The little magnifying glass, by the way, was really vital for making sure that we'd got rid of all the little scratches on the guitar on the fret wire or on the frets before we moved on to the next layer or next level of paper to bring it up to a shine. Okay, so we are ready. Now we have a body down here with a couple of shims in it, looking nice, and we have a neck with a shim in it, and we're going to put those two lots of things together. And what am I going to assume? Am I going to assume that we have enough room, or do I really need a shim? And a shim would have to go like that. Shims there, shims there. There would be more under there, but let's see if we can get away without that. I prefer not to put another one in. Too many shims spoils the broth. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is just turn this over, and I just want to put it back in, or sort of slot it physically into place, and then I'm going to get my drill ready. But I want to make sure that I've got the right screwdriver for these nuts, screws, whatever they are, no screws, because we want a good fit, particularly on this part of the thing. It's always quite difficult to see which is one. There's a good fit. Right, So I'm ready with that to put it. Now while I'm at it, I also might as well give this a bit of a quick clean because it's a bit grubby. Now when you're putting, my advice is when you're putting a neck plate back on, don't assume that you've placed your neck and body in the right position to each other, in relation to each other. Just do not assume it. It is possible to find that you've wedged the neck, I don't know how to describe it, but you can, even with tiny amounts of tolerances, you can actually get the neck caught in a way that it's not actually seated properly, although it looks like it. And what you end up with is something that's kind of jammed, could even be a millimetre or two out of place, and can be substantially wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume nothing, and I'm going to tack these in lightly, making sure that I place get the plate lined up okay. I'm going to tack these in loosely. I'm going to flip round and just have a look and make sure it looks right for a start, and make sure that it's seated level, and then look down the neck and make sure that it's kind of evenly balanced, it's not obviously out of place. If that's the case, then we can flip it back over, and I've got a torque setting on here about 7.5, whatever that really means, and now I'm going to use that to pull the neck and the body together, and I can feel them coming together much more tightly, and the torque kicks in quite early, and I'm not going to tighten beyond that, it doesn't need it. There we are. And then I can just have a feel, and it's all nicely in place. So there we have our neck nicely replaced. My concern before was that if when there's something, the way this neck sits in here feels really quite low. My worry was that when we put the tremolo unit back in and restring it, that we may find that my worry is if we find that we can't get the action right, that it's still too high, and that there's no way we can get it low enough without bringing the neck itself up. And that was where it felt like it was close to beforehand. Now while I'm at it, I'm looking at this thing, and what I think I'd like to do is I'd like to take this apart and give it a clean. It's one of those little details, so I'm going to just put the guitar down here out of the way safely. It's one of those little sort of attention to detail things that doesn't hurt at all. And we can do it quite quickly using this power driver. Now I know that there are 6 little saddles here, and I know the N2 have smaller grub screws in them, so I know where those N2 need to go back, but the rest are all identical, so they can go back in any position. Now by doing this, I'm messing up the intonation setting from the previous owner, or however it was set, but that's fine because we're going to redo that ourselves to a new setting. And so this just gives me a chance to give each of these components a quick clean, and it's quite, you'd be amazed how much nicer and fresher it looks when we've done it. So we drop all of these out, all the little springs off to one side. So we can do these individual units, get the green goo out, but also this little bit here, you can probably see it's quite mucky as it stands, and a quick blast with our miracle fluid will let us clean this up pretty nicely. It's never perfect because the chrome is always damaged from the little feet on the bridge saddles. There's always some kind of permanent damage to it because they move quite a bit and they scratch the chrome away. But I think you'd probably agree that that's a lot nicer looking now than it was 2 seconds ago. And why not start out with our guitar looking like that? It's going to be more attractive to a buyer. Similarly, these little saddles have a bit of kind of a bit of corrosion, but mostly they're discoloured by goo and grease from ages ago. So it doesn't hurt giving each one of them an individual clean up. Quite fiddly and hard to do, because that, you know, it'd be nice if we just had a sort of electric toothbrush. Sometimes I put them in a bowl of, I don't know, surgical alcohol and get the toothbrush on them. That's one way. Or I'm just doing it here with the naphtha, lighter fluid, on a rag. Just making sure I know which I've done and which I haven't. There's no point in doing all of them more than once. Again, small, just a little bit of time it takes, and can make quite a difference. Makes them feel newer, freshened up. I think that's one of the things, if you're going to sell guitars or resell guitars, refurbish and sell guitars, might as well give them their best chance, you know, fresh lease of life. If you're going to go to all that trouble of making them play well, you might as well make them look quite nice too, or as nice as they can. There is a limit to that. Some vintage guitars you just want to stop at a certain point because you need to leave the vintage grime on them because it's part of the character of them. But something like this from the turn of the century hasn't exactly got vintage character, but it's certainly easy enough to clean up. So they're clean. I've also gone here to give this plate quick clean down. Mostly picks up loads of dust on the inside, funnily enough. But again, no harm giving that a clean. And that's about it for parts on this guitar to be given a clean. So now we're in a position to load up the strings. Now, common sense would tell me to put on a dummy set of strings first. And why would it tell me to do that? Well, because if it really does need a shim, then it's going to reveal that pretty quickly. These should all be the same size, but in fact they are slightly different. But that'll do. Yeah, so do I want to discover that it needs a shim whilst having put the real, you know, the playing strings on, in which case it becomes quite difficult to take them off, and probably they need to be thrown away really. They're very hard to reuse strings that you've already put on. Or do I put on a set of dummy strings, test strings, and then if it needs a shim I can just pull those test strings off, throw them away and put a shim in and carry on. So that's probably a good plan. Can't get this to line up correctly. It's a shame, as soon as you handle this to put this back together again, it picks up grime in places that you can't quite get to clean up again, which is a bit silly. Anyway, so these bridge saddles, there's nothing too complex about them. They pull backwards and forwards by adjusting these little screws at the back here that I'm now turning. That pulls the saddle backwards and forwards, and then they have little tiny grub screws in there that you use to raise the saddle up and down. So backwards and forwards and up and down is the range you've got, and that's all you need to allow you to set your action and your intonation, as we shall see in a minute. So I'd have to say these haven't really become much shinier since I cleaned them, but at least I know they're clean. It makes me feel better. Okay. So we've got a guy coming over tomorrow who bought the Gould Les Paul copy, and he's bringing some more of his guitars over for us to discuss, so that should be interesting. Like being able to an excuse to spend time looking at and talking about guitars. It's always a good time. Okay, so there's all the bits together. If we bring up the guitar, like I said, I do have a set of strings here, and I think I might be disciplined enough to use them as a test, because I think this process of having to waste a good set of strings to prove that it needs a shim would be a bit demoralising actually. So into this I'm putting the floating point screws in, and they go, well, the problem is that I'm going to put them right down to the deck, but the problem we're going to have, if anything, is getting the action low enough. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, slightly different shape on either side. It's not broken, it just seems to have been designed that way. So basically, I can now put the tremolo spring back in, it'll hold the bridge unit in place, and I'll just then attach the other ones, one to the middle and one to the outside. And because of the way this is set up at the moment, the spring tension feels quite small, no, not small, but quite low, which means by comparison to when the strings are loaded, the tremolo is sitting quite far forward, which is probably something we may change using that great online tutorial I mentioned earlier on about how to set these 2-point floating tremolos, but we'll come to that a bit later. For now, we just want to load it up and see what happens to the basic action. Now, like I said, let's have a look what we've got. How many sets of strings have we got here? God, it seems rather a lot. Why do we seem to have so many in one go? Right, let's leave those for a minute. Let's try this set up here, which I seem to have put aside a bit more carefully. Storing old strings to reuse them can be really difficult because they get tangled up in each other and then they stick together and become kinked and almost impossible to use. So with a bit of luck, I might just be able to use this lot. So let's see if I can get them apart successfully. Starting with the fattest one. Let's go that way, push it out. Alright, that's alright. Difficulty is getting them through, we'll be getting them through the body. But in this case that seems to work okay. And we won't have a lot of spare, what's the word? There won't be a lot of spare material left over here when we're doing this, but it will be enough to get their string loaded on. Now these, as I said, these are just dummies for checking the playing action. If it comes, if it's okay and it is adjustable, then I won't need to. I'll still change the strings, but I won't need to do a shim. But if it looks like there's no way we're going to get the action down low enough to make it playable without raising the neck up, then that's what we'll have to do. And that's what this process is trying to find out. I'm actually quite glad that I kept these strings for just this purpose, having been caught out in the past by wasting or ruining a really good set of strings. So we're not really bothered about playing them or whether they tune up properly, so I'm just getting them on and loaded, I suppose, as fast as possible. Now the thing about the neck here, it's worth noting, come on, is that when we put the neck under load, it will pull the neck into a natural curve, so that we don't have to use the truss rod to make the neck go curved. We let the strings make the neck go curved, and we use the truss rod to balance it out so that it's where we want it, so it's not too curved. But that's what the strings will naturally do, that of their own accord. Come on, go through, please. I need you to go through. Time is moving on. It's got a little kink on the end of it, that's why it's not going to go through. It's never going to go through looking like that. But it will more likely go through looking like this. So a bit of extra time involved here, getting this bit, testing it. But it's critical, you know, if you're going to, this is going to be your guitar that you want to play, enjoy playing. There's no point having the neck set wrong, so that you'll never get the low action that we've earned by leveling all the frets. So it's pointless if we just end up having to play a dog of a guitar with massively high action on the 12th fret because we didn't put a shim under the neck. So this is what we're doing at this point. Okay, 3 more, go to the G. Again, the key thing about old strings is whether you can get them through the body of the guitar, because they get sort of crimped from use. And beyond a certain point, you'll probably never get them through, get them to poke out through the tremolo block. And this one's misbehaving already. Come on, you can do it. I swear to you, you can do it. You can do it. Okay, through. Yay! Sometimes it's the very finest ones that just out-curl themselves and you no chance. Come on. No, it's not going through. It becomes very difficult to work with as soon as they've already been bent once, and they'll pop out of the tuner peg, and this one's trying to scrape a line on the lacquer all the way around because it's so sharp. Hateful things, string ends. They're like the most dangerous things in the world, designed to pierce human flesh. I've already got a few of these videos where I get stabbed by one of these things. If you've got tender finger flesh, they will find it. Okay, a couple more. Let's get this done. I think these are, I have a feeling, in fact, these are 10s, and they're from somebody who plays 10s on their guitar. So these have come off a customer's guitar where they brought it to me, and it's really been pretty, the strings have been pretty new, but they've asked for a fret leveling and full setup. And so even though they've had new strings, relatively new strings, I'm still going to take those strings off, trash them, and start again. So again, we're now at the curly phase now, and it is just, afraid it's not playing ball, as they say. This is where it gets almost to the level at which it's kind of, you're going to give up the will to live, because you just cannot get this small gauge string through. You can't even hold the thing properly. That's the problem, because it's curling. It's got a massive kink behind it, and it's just bending every which way away from what you're trying to do. And I should end up trying to bend it like this. Come on. You know you want to go straight in. Do what you're told. Yes. But you can see it's not easy. I've got very, very little room to wind on here. I'm going to run out of data space on the disk any second now, so we will no doubt complete this task later, once we've done the video, or possibly in the morning, if that happens. Try to keep my poor little fingers out of the way of these spiky things that want to get me. Okay, and the last one, coiled around like a piggy's tail. Chances of getting this one through, fair to middling to 0. Chances of getting spiked by the ending of it and ending up screaming and cursing, high to likely. I'm hoping tomorrow I will take delivery of a brand new Harley Benton electroacoustic guitar, and it's a sort of by means of an experiment, because I bought a Harley Benton before, and that is brand name that belongs to Thomann, which is a German online guitar retailer, and I've been very impressed with the quality of the guitars they have. They suffer from appalling setups, which okay, I've got a broken string and I can't reach the end. Balls. See if I can find one from somewhere else just to make this thing complete. Put the right amount of pressure. Yeah, so I've had one before and they're absolutely brilliant. Brilliantly made things, badly set up. Which again is it's not at all unfamiliar to me. So what I'm looking at is that this particular, so I don't have a spare one on the right gauge there either. Okay, I'm going to chuck those because they're not full set. Yes, anyway, I have an idea that this particular acoustic is so good all-round quality. It's an electro-acoustic, such good all-round quality and so relatively cheap, or shall we say inexpensive, that it's potentially, I think it's a guitar that I could buy new and successfully do the setup work that it so needs, and then sell it on, and it still be profitable for me to do, and actually be a good bargain price, or bargain price for the customer. So I'm kind of very keen to try this out. So I am getting nowhere with trying to unpick this riddle. So there's a string that I think is what I need. Any chance of getting it unpicked at this end? Slim and none, I think, is what we're looking at. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so if I can see at that end, can I try pulling it back this end? Tangled up in all its coily bits. Oh, bloody hell. Well, I've got it out, but it's got a big crimp in it already, and it's completely coiled at this end as well, so whether or not this will actually, whether or not it's even the right length actually. Yeah, we'll just make it if we can get it through the body, but that remains to be seen because it's completely bent and coiled. And anyway, so yeah, I'm looking forward to, I bought this guitar, and as I say, they do them at a price that's so competitive, but they are crap, really badly set up. So they're not a good guitar as they currently sell them, but with the addition of a good setup, they are more than good. In fact, I think they're potentially great, amazingly good guitars. But there's no point in saying that if they are unplayable as far as the buyer or the whoever's learning to play the guitar. Or where's this damn thing going? Come on. Come up through the wrong side. Let's see if I can get it through here. Come on, you swine. There's nothing quite so frustrating as working with a coiled, bent string, trying to make it play. I might just get there at this rate. Except I'm not going to play this, but I'm just going to set it up under tension. We might get there finally. Okay. So yes, so we look forward to getting that electroacoustic, and actually what may well happen is if it's any good, I may well keep it and keep it myself and sell my standard or my basic Fender acoustic. Okay, so the point about this here is what I want to do, I just want to get the strings under a fair bit of tension to pull the tremolo forward, and then I'm going to look at the height of the action. And once I've ascertained the height of the action, I'm going to gauge using the whether using the grub screws here we're going to be able to set a playing action, because right now it's all over the place. But that's what we want to know, is can I use these settings here to bring this down low enough, or will I need to put a shim in under here? And that's all I really want to know. I need a tune. Back to being hideous action. So the tremolo's risen right up now. The action is just vile. I can't go any further down on these screws. I'm going to now try to lower the action to the lowest possible stop using this small Allen key. And if that is too high, then we are condemned. Yeah, well, that's whatever the word is. We're going to have to use a shim in the neck, which I prefer not to have done, but I'm looking at this and I'm seeing we've got no choice. It's shim time, ladies and gentlemen, which I sort of suspected, so that's quite good to have the inkling that's the case. Yeah, I don't know, you won't be able to see this very well, but hold on. Careful to do this without breaking something. So what we've got is okay, we've got the tremolo has raised up here into its natural seating position. It'll sit somewhere like that. I don't know if it's exactly that place, but it's somewhere where it's kind of correct, right? So that's its fairly normal seating position, and we've got this bass string, these grub screws here, screwed into their bottom stops, so that's as low as that bridge piece can go, that saddle can go, which then brings us across to here, and you can see that is, well, let's see what it is, I can tell you. I would want it to be around about, at most, 1.5 millimeters. Where's it gone? Oh, here it is. Yeah, 1.5 millimeters would be more, the most I'd want it to be, at the 21st fret. And actually what it's going to tell me is that is actually nearly 2.5, it's about 2.25. That's way too much, and there's no possible way of getting that any lower without putting a shim in the neck. So that's what we're condemned to do. So that's why I did that way round. Because had I just gone ahead and put a new set of strings on to discover that, I'd now have to take the whole set off. They'd all be crimped in these places here where they've gone through the body. That weakens them. They'd be coiled. It would make it a nightmare to get them back on, as you've just seen. So putting a spare set of strings on and pulling the guitar to tension and seeing basically the geometry tells us we're going to have to raise that neck because we've got no other means of lowering this action. If these posts were wound out and the whole action was high, we could take it down. Well, they're at the stops, and these little grub screws on this string here we're doing a test on are also at the stops, so there's nowhere else to go. So that means off with the strings, off with the neck, and we're going to now find ourselves, choose some sort of material to make a shim out of. It doesn't have to be absolutely precise, but we don't want to we don't want to lift the neck so far that it's going to create problems in the other direction, which is we're going to have to raise the strings up to meet it. Okay, we're just trying to take it up. I mean, I suppose we could say we're going to try and take the neck at this end of the heel of the neck. We want to raise that up by about 1 millimeter, which kind of tells you a little bit straight away what you need. It's going to need 1 millimeter under there. A bit about the reason I'm reluctant to do it is the fact there's a shim. If you think about it, a shim breaks the smooth, the face-to-face connection between two pieces of wood that you get when you put neck into the neck pocket. In fact, what I'm going to do in a minute, I'm going to probably cut these strings to get the curly bits off so they come through the body easier. But yeah, so the minute you put a shim under the neck heel, or yeah, is that right? The neck heel, yeah. You are lifting the back end of the neck higher, this end here, and you're kind of rotating it around where it touches on the front edge. So you're basically opening up a little gap with a shim under there. It's minuscule, but it does break the surface to surface connection. You create effectively an air pocket in there, which I think must have a slightly negative impact. I would suppose it has a slightly negative impact on the resonance of the strings. That's just my theory, and it's minuscule, tiny, but theoretically I think it has to be the case. I've not read anything that confirms that. It's just, you know, my theory. My theory. Okay, more strings to put in the bin. Okay, chuck all these out. Yeah, so you know, that's why in an ideal world you would have the angles good to begin with, and you wouldn't have to resort to shims. Although everybody does, and you know, you'll read everywhere people doing neck shims on guitars that have changed their geometry or their position over the years. Okay, so we know what we've got to do. We've got to go back, refit our appropriate thingy back to here, and take it out. And then we're going to look for the kind of material we need. And we want, I think it's about 1 millimetre we want. And we need a piece of plastic I think will be good, that is very much like what we already have there in terms of shims. Some guitars have little adjusters that allow you to push. In fact, it's as if these little holes usually allow you to fit one of those things, I think, and you can work it from the back and it will tilt the neck, well, it'll pitch up the neck from here. We don't have that. We've got a shim in place already, but what we're really now going to do is we're going to override that shim. You ask yourself, was that shim really supposed to be in that corner more than any other place? And I'm wondering if that shim was meant to be in the middle, but actually just moved and ended up being screwed in by the time somebody put the neck bolt in. I suspect it is, and it may well be that what we end up doing with this shim is taking this fella out, and we're going to put in a shim across the whole bit there, which has got to be about 1 millimetre thick. The question for me is, what have I got material wise that will do that job? And it may, I mean, you can use anything, to be honest. I think I'd prefer to use a piece of plastic. I think I've got a piece of plastic here that will do the job. No, it isn't. Oh, actually, you know what? It is nearly 1 millimetre. Let's cut a piece of plastic to match this pocket size here. Okay, it's just a clip just to mark it. It's not going to be a great great thick thing. I'm just resting on my bit of metal here, and then I'm just going to cut it down. What do I need width-wise? I need it to be relatively thin. I don't want it stretching all the way up the pocket, because I need it to pitch up the neck. It has to do that job. Okay, so if I place it in there like that, it can't really move much. And the idea it would be then we put this back in, and it's just struggling to fit in. Now that will have pitched up the neck by 1 millimetre, and I can see where it sits. Might be a good idea to take it. Oh, my knees are so sore. I'll take a little picture of this here, because I can see from the detail of where. Get the focus right. I can see exactly where it sits. Then, if I go back, take this fella out. Okay, back later, after some food. It's interesting that I'm got the shim under there and putting strings on now. And it's just about right. I think it might just be spot on when the tremolo lifts up under pressure. So we shall see. Hopefully it will. I don't want to have to make massive adjustments or change the shim around, take a bit of the shim off or something. Actually no, we should be fine. Of course we should be fine. We can lift up the tremolo on its posts. I forgot about that bit. Right. Also the unit will come forward anyway under load. So pull it through, pull it back about an inch, and then start winding. That's my motto. Make sure that the little barrel thing goes all the way through. Sometimes it gets stuck on the outside. That's not great because it ends up crimping it, but it then pings forward and goes through. And you've got a string with a crimped bit in the sort of line of play, as it were, which is not what you want. These Stratocaster Standard series guitars have turned out to be by far the best that I've come across of the basic Squiers. I know there are a few exotic Squiers that people talk about. I think it's a Squier 51 or something like that, and then there's some weird old Japanese Squiers. Certainly, I mean, there's the old Squiers. I've got one of them, a JV Squier, things like that. So they're quite exotic and they're really well made, or they were fantastically well made. So they are cut above these. But for the sort of modern Squiers, these standard series continue to be, I think, the best of the basic modern mass-produced Squiers. Be quite happy to have one, use one. Not sure. The only reason, I suppose, the only reason I didn't think of keeping one of these that's come through here is because actually two reasons really. One is I've got a Squier Strat from the Japanese JV Strat from the early 80s anyway, and also because I play a vintage AV6 Strat as well, so kind of I've got enough Strat kind of guitars to be going on with, and then on top of that I've got, actually no, also I've got the strattiest Strat of them all for me, which is the Sun Mustang, which is just more Strats than most of the Strats. So I'm kind of not, I don't really need another Strat, which is probably why I don't keep one of these. But if I didn't have any of them, I had no Strats at all, I would certainly want to keep something like this one, for example, because I think it's as good as I'm going to get, and you know, there's plenty of room for little modifications to make it even better. Okay, so that's everything. Just above. So that's fine. Okay, that's just the action on the on the saddle. Again, both of which can go up. I just want to get them into tension. Right, so I'm going to stop the video here in a minute because I'm going to be doing lots of fiddling with this action for a while, and it will get very boring pretty soon. But the point here is that we've got the shim in place, we've got clearance on the neck, truss rod is resisting it, so it's not a huge bend as before, so we're on the right track. And I'm just going to mess around and get these different saddles set correctly, and then we'll come back to it tomorrow to do the kind of more detailed action work, and certainly the work around the nut, which is not too bad actually, but we'll need something doing. So I'm fairly confident that I don't need to do anything like trying to take these strings off again. So for now I'm going to cut back on the string off, excess string, cut it off, because I can really do without it sticking in my fingers every 5 minutes when I'm trying to do something. I had enough of that in the recent past. Okay, so again the tremolo arm's going to come up when this thing gets into gets under the right tension, but for now I'll cut it off, and we'll come back to this one tomorrow. Yo, hello! Welcoming you back to the place of Reloved Guitars. It'd be a Saturday and I'd be trying out a little bit of this yonder Squier Standard Strat after having just put the neck back on yesterday with some shimminess. Lovely quacking stratting. There's the reverb. String still stretching, but yeah, still bedding in, and the tremolo is kind of not fully settled in, but yet to balance out. Anyway, tones are lovely, typical Squier Standard Strat, but as always with a tremolo, 2-point tremolo system, quite hard to get into tune initially, because the as you tighten one, it compensates by detuning the another. Actually, it should be tuned not to relative harmonic tuning, but anyway, just doing it quickly for now. That'll do for now. So, yeah, having left this overnight, we're back here with the Squier Standard Strat, and actually at the moment all things are looking in, wrong button, all things are looking in good shape for this. So what I want to do now is, I'm confident that we've got the shim correctly done, so let me just get rid of guitar amp and guitar lead and amp, or the other way around. And then we'll home in a bit on the this thing and its playing action, and let's see if we can get everything tweaked up in the right kind of fine tuning. But before we do that, I'm going to just pull this thing around. We call it a camera. Let's see, we've got some. Ooh, it's a slightly new arrangement. Can't see a damn thing out of these glasses. So I've done some sanding a little bit earlier, and I'll show you what I did some sanding on. I did some sanding whilst making this little stumpy fellow, which is going to potentially be the next of my travel guitars, made with blocks of oak, which I've taken delivery of. Because I enjoyed making the first one so much, I thought I will make something else, maybe similar, maybe a little bit different, but who knows. Anyway, so yeah, back to this one. So what did I find out so far? I think the neck relief is looking okay for here, from here. I don't want to do anything else with it just yet. I found that I'm playing high notes up here. On this one, I found it's choked off, but that might be because the action is really low. So the G string is needing a bit more of a raise. And let's see. Doesn't take much to sort out these little things, so I'm just going to go a tiny bit higher. So it's literally a millimetre of difference, or not millimetre, a tenth of a millimetre makes the difference. So it's quite fine tolerances. Now I don't know if that's really how I want this set, but anyway, what are we doing? We are making sure the playing action and the neck work together, and then we'll go and concentrate on the nut part down here. So all the electrics work nicely. This profile I've got kind of dialed in here, it looks okay, just in terms of it following the neck radius. Tiny bit, feels a little bit high where it's looking on the G, but I don't want to lose. I don't want to sort of end up causing that choking on the bends again. But let's stop it there. Let's see if we get away with it. No, it's not happy with it. So we'll put it back in. Ooh. Righty-ho. So sometimes this is a combination of the action setting here, and also of the amount of relief in the neck. So it might be a bit of each. I don't really want to go any higher than this, because this gives us a profile that's, I think, a bit more extreme than the actual guitar is. Yeah, okay, I might have another look at the profile, the settings on the neck relief. There's a measure that we can take on this, but looks like there's enough there. I don't really go much higher than that. So we've got, as a measurement, we've got okay, so that's 1.25 millimeters down there. That's 1. Oh God, I think I need to be careful because this is really low. That's 1.5. So the G is standing a little bit higher than everything else at 1.5. So we could probably bring the others up to meet the G rather than lower the G. So that's cool. All right, so that'll do for an action at the moment. The tremolo seems to have reverted to where it's set before, which isn't so bad. Looks about horizontal to me, not good enough. So what I'm going to do is just have a look now at the, if I can just move you out of the way, have a look at the toolbox down there. Dig out the doofer gauge, what do we call it, feeler gauge, and pull this. Now I do have some control over the height on this damn camera stand. Way. It's not a very good mic stand actually, it's trying its best. So I'm going to keep an eye on this too, because it's not plugged into the mains, so it'll probably conk out. Alright, so the question is, at the moment, what is the gap of the strings over the first fret? And I don't think it's huge, so I don't think it will be as high as point. Get this little floaty one in here. It's like a piece of foil. Alright, so I don't think it's as big as 0.5 of a millimetre, so I'm just going to chuck 0.5 in there and see if I've got any gap room. Well, it is as high as 0.5, it's more in fact because it's still playing with the 0.5 shoved under there. So I know from experience that this, to play well, this needs to be about 0.25 only. Now I could do all this, let me just think about it. I could do all this standing up at this position, in which case I have to do all my cutting, or I could do it lying down, in which case the neck is either under gravity, the effect of gravity, or if I put this under here judiciously, just to where it starts to, there you go, just takes the weight off it. So it's kind of similar to being in the upright position, and it also allows me to see much better. So looking at the 0.25, if that's what we're aiming for, that's way off 0.25. So we've got quite a lot of distance to go. And so here we come to one of the most important parts of the whole setup. And it's where we get to use a set of these little files. And the nut files are quite expensive piece of kit, which I bought from an eBay supplier who imports them from Japan. But they're well worth the money if you're going to do more than one guitar, because what it allows me to do is just slack off the E string to begin with, and I'm going to use the reason these are actually a set for a 0.9 gauge of strings, but what I've actually discovered is they're too narrow for 0.9. I don't know if it's because they're inaccurate or just because they're so tight you would have strings sticking in the slot. So I've bumped it so that actually I'm using them all one step out of sequence, but it works for me, which means I use for my first string, second string, third, fourth. No, wrong. I use this for my first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and this for my sixth, and with a bit of help from that one. So I'm going to just start by cutting down, or widening slightly this nut slot. Now, the process of doing this has to be done very carefully. And what I do is each time I make a little some cut in the slot, I bring it back up to the correct tuning, or close to the correct tuning, so I'm under the correct tension, and then I just check again with my feeler gauge and see if there's room, and I can see both visually from the shadow and from the way the string moves, that there's still more to go. And that's really important, is if you're going to do this work, you need to do this with that sort of maxim in mind that says you can take some more off, but you can't put it back on. So everything in this department, as with a lot of these things, including the fret leveling, has to be done very, very carefully and with small increments, because you can stop, take it slowly and stop when you've got to the right level. Don't do it too harshly, because you'll take off too much and then you'll be playing the catch-up game, which usually involves either a new nut or with a white nut like this, you could be using the baking soda and super glue trick, which is very, very effective, but it involves a trip to the house and an admission on camera that I've cut too far with my nut files. Okay, so it's on that principle. You can always take a bit more off if you haven't gone far enough, but you'll struggle to put some back on, other than using bicarbonate of soda and super glue. So a little tiny bit at a time. We're going to do all 6 strings this same kind of way and at the same pace. So if you think you've got the whole process sorted out now, you can skip this bit because it's going to take some time. But while we're at it, it's worth just telling you that's very close to being there. You can still play the string with the 0.25 feeler gauge under this, so it's obviously not there yet. If it was there, we wouldn't be able to play that string openly. But while we're doing this, then can't underestimate the importance of this particular part of the process. And I've learned over time that the setting of these slots, and therefore the height of the string over the first fret, is probably the single most important modification you can make to the guitar to improve the way it plays and sounds. And the reason for that is if you're an experienced guitarist, you may know this, but newcomers to guitaring won't. When the strings, if the strings are too high over the first fret, and by too high I mean 0.6 of a millimetre instead of the 0.25 we're looking for, so you see we're dealing with very, very small amounts. But if they are too high, okay, we're as close as we want to get to 0.25, almost one more little touch and we're done. Yeah, but if the string is too high, or i.e. the slot isn't cut deep enough, and therefore the string is too high over that first fret, and it might be 0.6 instead of 0.25 of a millimetre, then what's going to happen is when you play the notes using on that string, either in when you're playing open chords or even bar chords, or you're playing individual notes close down here, close to the nut, that height problem will force you to press the strings quite a long way down to get them to touch the fret, and in doing so you will bend the note sharp. And that's pretty spot on. So you bend the note sharp, and a lot of people, newcomers to guitaring, and actually old timers, don't know that, and so they just tune the guitar perfectly according to their tuner, and then play an open chord, and it sounds horrible, and just can't work out why that is. And everything else is right. The intonation down at that end is correct. The string's the exact length for the guitar, for the neck, and so on. All those things taken care of, but still it sounds really messy when you play open chords, or you play a single note in a melody and it sounds sharp and it's really unpleasant, discordant sounding, and that can ruin the experience of playing the guitar. That can, actually, I tell you what, with this tremolo I'm going to need to keep this under tension. Okay. Yes, so that experience of getting these sharp notes will quickly ruin the experience of playing the guitar, and to most people it will just feel like their experience of this problem will just be sort of a vague feeling of just not being able to get this guitar in tune. Don't know what's wrong with it, but I can't quite get it in tune. The chords don't sound right. Now, I know now that is because of the difference of a tiny amount in the depth of these, or the height, I suppose, the depth of these nut slots. And once you get them right, then that intonation problem is cured. And your open chords sound really in tune with your open strings. So your fretted chords down here sound in tune with your open strings. And that's critical if you want to make the guitar intonate correctly, or play along well with itself and or other instruments and musicians. So a tiny little amount of distance can make such a big difference to the way the guitar plays and feels. So first of all, if this strings are too high, then all these notes are slightly sharp. Secondly, if the string is too high over the first fret, i.e. the nut slots are too shallow, then this is really hard to play and it feels like a lot of effort. And that's most people's experience of playing the guitar when they buy a budget priced guitar. And actually I'm finding more and more it is also the same with the expensive brand guitars as well. To a shocking degree, they also have this exact same problem, because nobody's taking care of it, it seems. So, as I said, probably the biggest difference you can make to your guitar is this, what we're doing now. And once it's done, you get a guitar that is way easier to play, which is great in and of itself, but it's also a guitar that is intonated properly. You won't have notes going sharp. And you can, if you want to see this for yourself and how it works, go and find a guitar that you've got with high action over the first fret, tune your E string perfectly to E, and then watch your tuner as you fret the E string on the F note, and you'll hear that it's probably, if the strings are high off the first fret, that nice perfectly tuned E will suddenly turn into an F, but an F that's maybe 1/3 of a tone sharp, or maybe 30 cents sharp, or whatever it is. So if that isn't a major problem for playing the guitar, I don't know what is. And that can make the experience completely unrewarding. So if you learn to take care of it, which I'm doing here, you can have a much better playing experience. And also for learners, they won't be thinking that they're doing something wrong. Why does everything sound so horribly out of tune, even when I've gone to all the trouble of tuning it? Hey, here you are, visitors. Hello, my darling.
Hello. I've put my fishies on my wreath. It looks fabulous.
Brilliant.
I'm really pleased. I haven't got enough fish, though. I have to make some more.
Hello, cats.
I broke a few as well because I'm too impatient to eat them. I'm very pleased.
Good, I'll see it in a minute.
Yes. I'm going to start making some dinner, I suppose.
Remember, you're not allowed to ask me for any money when you come in the shed now. The YouTube audience will comment on it. Right, let's do the...
You have to explain we live miles away from the bank.
And you're allowed to ask me for money.
Well, really, I just want to change mostly, don't I? And then let's do the tummy. Yes.
Good, I'm glad it's working.
surprised actually. I really like it. I haven't put enough gold and silver on the fish, but that's okay. I'd probably add a little bit more if I could be.
Hot roast. Okay.
I'm going a bit.
Oh, bugger.
I was trying to be saving of that.
I forgot to bring the bin out again.
Yeah,
Having
I
emptied
think
it.
you might find a cat or soap in
Okay.
there. Although, I could be wrong, he sat right on the gold leaf while I was putting it on.
Morris.
Yeah, and he's got bits on his tail now. Gold bits, haven't you? Blingy cat. Where's that rolling? Shame.
I don't know, everything here seems to be made a noise.
Yeah.
Maybe they're outside. I have to remember to leave a clear path for Morris because he just knocks everything over otherwise.
Yeah, I know, he's clumsy, isn't he? Hello,
Who's that?
monkey cat. Can't actually help. Bunny. Holly. Right. Ta-ra.
See you in a bit.
There's a spiral few up there.
It's kind of cold out there, isn't it?
Oh, starry night.
Okay, so we're coming up to still got some clear room, fresh air, which we can keep working on this D string, and I use a combination of switching between these welding nozzle cleaning things and the slots, files, because it can be quite helpful to just widen the slot a little bit using these. Now normally if this was a fixed fixed tremolo tail thing, I would have these first two strings hanging off at the moment and be working just on the D string slot on its own. But the reason I don't on this is because it makes such a big difference with the floating tremolo that if I were to take off those first two to get good clear access to the D for the gauge, then the tremolo would be pulled right back and change the action, because it would it'd be kind of hitting the deck. This isn't perfectly accurate in a sense because the tuning isn't perfectly accurate, but it's enough. It's close enough to putting the correct load on the string to making the nut action correct. Okay, so I am going to a tiny little bit more. I'm going to do one more swipe on this D string and then I'm going to move on. So you see I'm just going up to roughly to pitch. And that's close enough, I don't want to go any further. 0.25 that I'm using is the bottom, it's the kind of lowest, I don't want to go any lower than that. Sometimes if I'm not feeling entirely confident, I might stop at a 0.3, which is a tiny amount difference, but it gives you a little bit extra margin. But I'm fairly confident in using this now, so I'm happy to go to a 0.25. So I'll just come in from this side now and just check the gap over here. It's quite a bit, but not a massive amount. Also, as you change over, what you find at this point is often the cutting gets quite a lot easier and quicker just because the slot is much smaller. So you have to be careful you don't kind of go too far too quick. So it's just a matter of being kind of conscious rather than just blindly hacking away at it. If you hack away, you might find that you're suddenly down on the wood. You cut right the way through too quickly, and that's a pain because then you're off into starting again mode. So currently I'm looking for the one that's equivalent to a G here, and they're quite hard. I think that's Claire singing in the kitchen. I can hear from here. I think it's this one. Yeah, that's right. So just keep it out while I'm doing the adjustments. So I had a guy come over today, Ken, came over to pick up a guitar that he bought, and that was the Gould Les Paul copy, a classy looking beastie. Not him, the guitar. A nice sort of red, sunbursty kind of thing, a deep red, I don't know, wine red or something. It's quite nice. Right, almost here on this one. Yeah, so we had a couple of hours of guitar talk, which was nice, and catching up a bit on the work front. Tardy, you might say. I think this will be, well, there's still a gap there. You can tell by just being able to run, play the note with the feeler gauge directly underneath, so you can be pretty sure there's more space. One of the things about these welding nozzle cleaner things, they're really good and cheap. And actually they are a good way for somebody to get into this process of cutting the nut slots, but they have to say they kind of become unmanageable at around about the B string, because they're so bendy. You find that you can practically not cut anything. So in real terms, that's why I ended up buying these files here, because by the time you got down to the little scrawny fiddly things here, you just couldn't use them. So I'm kind of pretty much put them aside at this point and stick just with the files. Right, okay, didn't do a check there. This is very close. These tolerances are very, very close right now, so I've got to be very careful not to overcut anything, because they hardly need any adjustment at all, and I don't want to ruin it all having come so far. Just I want to be careless. Like I say, if I do, you'll see me running for the house to get the bicarbonate of soda out, or if it was really bad I could just replace the nut altogether. The bicarb trick, you know, it is completely, what's the word, livable with. It's not bad at all. God, it's really low, but it's still got. I think I'm just going to tempted to stop on that one. Oh, there's a little bit of still a bit of room. It's funny. It's each time I do this, I get tempted to kind of pull out early, if you like, because you don't want to mess it up. And then I think, just as I'm about to pull out early, I think, oh, well, hang on a minute, why are you doing this? You know what the tolerance is, you know you can get there, don't wimp out. And then I carry on. Okay. Right, we're on the last one now. So I'll just transfer over to this, and I'll just keep an eye on the video there, because it's going to run out of battery shortly. I'm busy charging something else. Again, less rather than more. I'm also, when I cut these, I'm also making sure that I'm tipping the pitch of the cut backwards away from the nut, because I want the string to launch off the front edge of the nut, not the back edge, if you get what I mean. Have a feel of this. Very easy to play now, that's nice. Okay, now what I am going to do is just quickly, string by string, I've got some here already, I'm going to just go and dump underneath the string a little bit of graphite, and that will help string bends. It's just basically pencil lead if you like, but you can buy it in little containers from the hardware shop. And again, I'm going to do it string by string here, without, because on a different fixed tail guitar I'd probably just pull all the strings off at once, but because this is under pressure, under tension as a floating tremolo, I'd like to keep most of the tension on it. Goes everywhere, but you can clean up. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of the nut cutting bit, and then after this we've got the intonation to do. Followed by basically another clean up. And then we'll take it inside and hope for some nice weather tomorrow. We can get some pictures, so we can put it out as a listing. So the idea of the graphite is it just helps it to not to get into that sort of pinging mode. Slight problem with any of these Fender Squiers is that they have something of a crap style of string tree. I don't know if you can see these little things here, and these kind of grip the strings a bit fiercely, and if they're kind of canted off to the wrong side, they can hook up the strings and arrest them as they're trying to move through when you're bending or tuning or whatever. Alternatively, the string can sometimes get stuck underneath them or cause it to ping as it goes underneath as well, because of the fact they're a bit rough. And actually what you can't really do is put a load of graphite on the underside of those things, because it just falls off. So they're not ideal. If I was keeping a guitar like this for a long time, I would probably end up doing it, probably on a bit of a slant here, but hey, I'd probably end up buying a different kind of roller set. Interesting, we've got a flat string here. Again, the action is really low, and I may actually be tempted to, rather than take these little saddles up anymore, I think I may just crank up, if I get the right screwdriver, crank up the, what's that thing called? Tremolo post. Because I want a bit more, needs a bit more, a bit of a height lift there, because the action is now a fraction too low, and that's a kind of result of a combination of the cut, or the adjustments and the cuts to the nut and the setting of the action down here. So if we come out, it should raise it up a little bit. Then we'll make adjustments backwards then with the individual ones. Right. Now what gives me is a little bit more room, free room to take this G down a bit, because it was a bit higher than everything else, and it feels, looking down the strings, which is quite a good way of telling once you're doing the setup, if you look down, pull them together so they're almost level, pull the angle so they all almost look level, and then look down them and you can see which ones seem much closer to each other than the others, and what you'll see is the ones that you've got set a little bit too high in relation to each other. So I'm just doing a little adjustment there, which will change the tuning again, of course. Nice. Okay, we're getting there. Right. So actually we're in a good place now. If I think I might need to borrow the power here. I don't want to get caught out with the power going off while we're in the middle of doing this, because it's a shame since we're heading towards the final lap of the setup. So I'm just going to shove the power in at this point. It probably makes a big noise, and I'm just going to crank the camera up a bit level. Okay, so we're sort of set up to do the intonation right now, so I'm just going to get myself the tuner app on the iPhone. I need a lead. Let's get an easier one that isn't quite so beautifully made and pain in the backside to use. And I want a screwdriver. And what do I need? I need a Phillips head of a small size. There's probably one in here that I could use. I can never reach it. No, that's an Allen key. That's another Phillips. Oh well, there's a really ideal one, but I can't get it from this angle. So I'm going to use this one, which will do. Actually, no, I'm going to use this one that gives me a bit more room, and will also do. Fine. Right, So here we go. We're going to do this with the guitar up on its edge. We want a clean sound with no effects whatsoever. And I'm gonna, right, so we're ready. Sounds nice already, but lovely. Oh, I love the sound of these. So what we're going to do, what's intonation? Well, a way of looking at it is this, I think. Lots of ways to describe it. But you have a neck on the guitar, and if you can see on the guitar that the frets get closer and closer together on the neck in a certain kind of rate, and that rate is carefully calculated. And so for a neck where the frets get closer together at that particular rate that they do here, you need to have strings of a certain length. So this neck wouldn't work if you put strings 6 feet long on, because the intervals each fretted, the intervals when you fretted each position would be just way out. There'd be only fractions of a tone. So this is designed. This neck is designed to produce recognisable or constant accurate musical notes and half notes. And to do that, it has to have a strings of a dependable fixed length. So the neck is built. All these necks are manufactured in a particular way, and what key in that manufacture is what's called a scale length. So it's a notional or nominal length of free length or rotating or vibrating length of the string. And so if you choose, okay, I'm going to have a scale length of 25.5 inches or whatever, and you put that into your manufacturing machine calculations, it will produce a neck. You know, it'll chuck out a series of measurements which tell you where to put the frets to make the correct interval notes with a string of that length. And that's great. So we have now a neck that works with a string that's this long because we put the bridge in the right place. So having put the neck on the body, we know where to put the bridge. That's great. But each string has to be set slightly different from each other string, and that's to accommodate or to account for the different thicknesses and materials the strings are made with. So how do you change the length of each string? Well, these little saddles here allow you, by turning the screws on the back, they wind them backwards and forwards depending on which way you turn the screw. And when you wind it backwards and forwards, you shorten or lengthen, if you pull it back, this string to fine-tune it for this neck. And that's basically what you're doing when you're intonating using the bridge saddles. And the way we find out whether it's correct or it isn't is to use a kind of harmonic method. And I'm doing it with the guitar in the playing position because gravity, if I do it this way up, gravity has quite an influence on the neck, pulling it downwards, and it will change what's happening. So to be accurate and to intonate it in a way that's consistent with how you play it, even though I love the way this sounds already, we're going to use do it string by string, and we're going to use a harmonic method. So first of all, we want to tune the guitar to a harmonic ping. So you can see that's flat of E. So all we do now is just, first of all, you've got to make sure that only one string rings out. And then using the tuner, we're going to not speak because that messes up the tune reading, but we're going to tune it up to E on the harmonic. That's good enough. Now, if our string is the right length for this neck, that note there we just pinged will be the same as the fretted note. So let's look at the two. Pinged, fretted. And if you're quite musically inclined, you'll hear that that's sharp. You can hear that sharp. The fretted note is sharp compared to the pinged harmonic. And you can see it playing out there as about it's about 7 cents sharp. Okay, and that means it's too short. The string is too short. If that second note the fretted note is too sharp, it means the string's too short, it means we have to pull the bridge saddle back this way. And to do that, we will turn it clockwise, which will wind the saddle back. Now in doing so, it will probably also put the string under more tension, so it will go sharp. Now we need to tune it down again, because we want to ping the harmonic again on E. And that's spot on. So we go to the next one. Quite a bit sharp. So again, we're going to dial this one in the same way, turn it clockwise, and I know that when these things are intonated properly, they go in a pattern. They go forwards, back a little bit, back a little bit, forwards again, back a little bit, back a little bit. So once you know that, you can start presetting them to get close. But again, as you pull it back, it goes up in tone. So we've got to dial it back to a B. Pretty close. If anything, a little bit sharp, which means again it's too short, so we'll, what are we on G, we'll just pull that back a bit. I can see to get my screwdriver in there. Again, retune. Sorry, I was on a B, wasn't I? I've turned the wrong thing. That's okay actually. No, too sharp. Tune to a pinged G. Sharp. So we're going to pull that one back, and that's the G. And it's then ending up where I'd expect, staggered set of 3 together. Still a little bit sharp. Hard. Sometimes it gets quite hard to see what's happening with these. They fluctuate quite a bit. Okay, close. bit sharp. So again, we'll pull this bit back a bit, and then the rest will probably come back from there. So I can, if I know that's got to come back, I can now stagger the other two back a little bit to give us a good starting place for final tweaking in a minute. But let's go back to the D. Still a little bit sharp, so I'll pull it back a bit more, and then I'll pull the others back in relation to it too, because I kind of know where they should be relative to it. Okay. It's where the note ends. The attack part on these lower strings always wave as it goes up and then down. So look where both the harmonic and the fretted note settle, right? Settles on the A, goes high, settles around the A. It's good enough for me. Spot on as well. So let's try and get this tuned once and for all. Nice. So, my ladies and my gentlemen, there we have the bringing back to life of the Fender Squier Standard Series Stratocaster from an absolute pig of a setting with the neck so banana shaped that it was just beyond any reasonable belief, to a guitar which is now got a really nice playable setup, and the neck has the correct amount of thingamajig, you know, what's that stuff? Relief. And a nicely balanced tremolo system. Returns to tune every time, and we'll get the arm out on it later on, it's in the box. But also perfect intonation, and you've seen it happen, and you can see how it's gone into two groups of three, top E, B and the G, and then again another group here with the D, A and the E. And that's how a guitar tends to look when the intonation, or certainly a Fender style guitar with this kind of tremolo and bridge arrangement, tends to look when the intonation is set properly. So if you see a guitar on sale with all of those little bridge saddles set in a straight line, you know that it hasn't been intonated. Now, what does it tell you? Well, it sort of tells you that the owner perhaps doesn't know how to do that, but it also tells you the owner is somebody who doesn't know that that's something that would help their playing. So you can, it's not cynical exactly or creepy, but you can know straight away something about what the owner or the seller of that guitar, their relationship to it. You know, if they tell you they're experienced players and it's beautifully set up by a professional luthier, blah blah blah, as you often do in big capital letters, and then you see the line, the saddles all in a line showing that it hasn't in fact been intonated properly, then you just kind of blow out the idea that it's been professionally set up, because if it isn't intonated correctly, then it hasn't been professionally set up. So it sounds like a tiny little detail, but actually that little detail can tell you an awful lot, and certainly tell you an awful lot if you're the prospective buyer and you really want to know whether to take the claims being made for the guitar seriously or with that proverbial pinch of salt. Okay, so if you ever see those things in that, the saddles in a line, and somebody's telling you that it's all been beautifully, perfectly set up by a professional luthier, blah blah, you know, in fact, that's not true. And you can either ask the person about it if you really want to, or you can just pass it up and move away, because the person's telling you porky pies. And if they're, the way that I look at it is, if they're telling you a lie about it being set up properly, what else are they telling you a lie about? You know, why would somebody bullshit about setting it up if they haven't? And if they're going to lie to you about that to try and get some more money out of you, then walk away, because they'll be lying to you about something else. So it's you know, a tiny little detail, but one of my number one tips for getting it right and making sure you get a good quality guitar. Okay, so there we go, folks. Thank you for spending the last X amount of time doing this. I mean, just as a last final thought, when somebody tells you on a listing that a guitar's been professionally set up and in fact it hasn't, you now know that it's not just a casual little selling, you know, little white lie. When they tell you it's been set up professionally and they hope you believe them, we're talking the difference between 3 hours work being done and not being done to make the difference that has now been made to this guitar. So it's not some little white lie, it's a big deal. This is 3 hours of hard, careful work gone into making this guitar play brilliantly. And if somebody's lying to you about that to try and convince you that that's been done when in fact it hasn't, it's no small thing. That's, you know, it's a real seriously misleading practice. And you can see how much time it takes to get it to play as well as this guitar now does. Thanks for spending time with me. I'm Sam. This is the Reloved Guitars Workshop. Many more such guitars to come through. If you like this one, get along to the listing and buy it pretty quick, because it won't last long. These Squier Standards go very quickly. Okay, so see you again.